Introduction. This book is dedicated to our patients. Our program, Diet of Hope, is based on how we interpreted the science of nutrition and what our practical experience has taught us over the last 30 years. Amazon has listed close to 20,000 books that deal with nutrition and diets. We have evaluated multiple scientific articles, textbooks, expert opinions, and popular diet books. Some of the more trustworthy books we have listed in the back of this book. Some of those books cover diametrically opposed opinions. The spectrum of advice goes from low carbohydrate diets to low fat diets to high protein diets to whole plant diets and calorie restricting diets. Then we have the more outrageous claims of cookie diets, cabbage soup diet, a diet based on a person's blood group, and many more. Not only is the public confused, but also the medical profession. Most physicians believed, or still believe, in the heart-healthy diet, a diet popularized with the food pyramid in 1992. We were told we should eat at least 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, cereal, and rice daily, starting at age 2. In addition, we were told to reduce our cholesterol and fat intake, especially saturated fat, and use polyunsaturated vegetable oils instead. Those recommendations originated at the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, the creator of the food pyramid. The mission of the United States Department of Agriculture is to promote agriculture. Dr. Willett, professor at Harvard Medical School and chairman of the Department of Nutrition, stated that the USDA food pyramid guidelines are not only wrong, but dangerous. I fully agree with this statement. Eating saturated fat and cholesterol were thought to be the main culprit causing heart disease. This was a hypothesis that became a universal belief. Eating a low-fat and high-carbohydrate diet was felt to be heart healthy. The food pyramid was promoted by all medical societies, including the Heart Association and Diabetes Association. A tremendous amount of money and effort went into research trying to prove this hypothesis. To date, published epidemiological, biochemical, and dietary studies do not support the idea that this type of heart-healthy diet prevents heart disease, strokes, high cholesterol, or high blood pressure. Yet, the whole nation adopted the heart-healthy diet. Fat consumption decreased, carbohydrate consumption increased, pasta and cereals became healthy foods. But this change of our diet had unintended consequences. We are now experiencing an epidemic of obesity and diabetes, plus a multitude of associated medical problems such as metabolic syndrome, hypertension, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, gastric reflux, and multiple cancers. These diseases share the same underlying cause, the modern heart-healthy diet. 67% of all Americans are either overweight or obese. Close to 100 million Americans have diabetes or are pre-diabetic. The annual cost to society for the treatment of diabetes alone is close to $275 billion in 2014. The cost for diabetes care is estimated to be $3 trillion over the next 10 years. Death rates for heart disease over the last few years have declined. However, most experts agree that this is related to a very aggressive and successful treatment of coronary heart disease and not a change in diet. Statistics from the year 2010 show that 1 million Americans underwent cardiac catheterization. 500,000 patients were treated with coronary angioplasty and stents, and 395,000 had bypass surgery. 50% of men over 65 are on statin medications, as are 38% of women. Nearly 50 million adults take blood pressure medications, National Center of Health Statistics. A decrease of smoking from 24% of adults today compared to 42% in 1965 certainly has contributed to the decrease of heart disease. However, we know with the increase of diabetes and obesity there will be an increase of heart disease in the future. The risk of a diabetic patient to develop a heart attack is the same as for the patient who already had a heart attack. It is an official policy that all diabetics should be on statin medications. Now, we have 4 new expensive medications to treat obesity. We have become more and more dependent on the pharmaceutical industry. Prevention should be the answer for this massive increase of diseases. I retired from my interventional cardiology practice 6 years ago. Together with my wife, we are dedicating our knowledge and time to the benefit of our patients. We are convinced and have data to prove that our program, the Diet of Hope, can help treat and prevent many diseases, especially diabetes and obesity. Our reward? Making a difference in changing people's lives. Diet of Hope, a lifestyle change. Teaches proper nutrition, provides sufficient nutrition, teaches portion control, prevents hunger and provides satiety, makes people accountable, helps change behaviors, provides daily simple menu ideas, avoids simple and refined carbohydrates, promotes complex carbohydrates except wheat, no calorie or carbohydrate counting, provides sufficient but not excessive proteins, promotes use of omega-3 fats, avoids trans fats, reduces caloric intake, gluten-free, lactose-free, aims at reducing prescription drug use, ideal for the treatment of obesity, ideal for the treatment of diabetes, lowers blood pressure, promotes health, can be followed for life, no drugs used, no gimmicks. Chapter 1. A Cardiologist's Journey. As did almost all of my colleagues, I too believed that a low-fat diet would reduce heart disease. Nutritional cases in medical schools were non-existent. The knowledge a physician receives comes from the same source available to the public. Primary information is obtained from consensus statements from our government, medical societies, and the press. The gospel of the benefit of a low-fat diet became ingrained in the national psyche. The popes of nutrition clearly had established a religion. Fat and cholesterol were evil. We physicians had no reason to doubt this religion, neither did the public. As Mark Twain stated, it ain't what you don't know what gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. There were many diets available, but the consensus was that they didn't work. The pharmaceutical industry was eager to help. The search for a magical pill to reduce weight was intense. Several pills made it onto the market. Fen-phen, rimonabant, but later one had to be withdrawn because of serious side effects. Now we have 4 new diet pills. During my career as a cardiologist, my philosophy was to prescribe a new drug only after it was tested by the market for at least 1 year. These 4 new pills are only modestly effective, have potentially serious side effects, and are very expensive. The Diet of Hope renders much better results. I dispensed the low-fat diet advice freely to all my patients. I wasn't very successful. Everyone gained weight. Diabetes became an epidemic. Heart disease remained a huge problem. But what else was there? Dr. Robert C. Atkins started a revolution declaring that the antidote to obesity and diabetes was reducing carbohydrates and increasing protein and fat. Other books were published supporting his thinking, such as Protein Power, the South Beach Diet, and many more. This was blasphemy in the eyes of the gods of the low-fat diet. However, millions of people tried these diets and succeeded. Now, the patients were teaching the physicians what worked in the real world. I had my own epiphany when an old patient of mine tried the Atkins diet, lost weight, and improved his cholesterol levels. I tried it myself and lost 20 pounds in 4 months. Despite of eating high-fat and cholesterol diet, my lipids improved significantly. I had several discussions with Dr. Atkins. He sent me some of his research results and suggested I do my own research, which I did. This experience made us realize there was life beyond the low-fat religion. Over the next 15 years, my wife and I studied literature on nutrition. My wife became a certified nutritional consultant, and we explored research not just in the US, but also in European countries. In the 19th century, a low-carbohydrate diet was generally accepted as a weight loss diet in both Germany and England. The Chancellor of Germany, Bismarck, lost 60 pounds in a year with a diet of lean meat, veal, mouton, and vegetables. He avoided sugar, potatoes, and limited bread. Going on a low-carbohydrate diet was called banting in England. William Banting, a London undertaker, had become very obese. He couldn't tie his shoes anymore. He tried exercise and gained more weight. He reduced calories and felt miserable. He found a physician who introduced him to a diet of meat, fish, and game. On this diet program, he lost 50 pounds in a year and felt healthy. In 1863, he published a letter on corpulence addressed to the public. Dr. Atkins was introduced to a low-carbohydrate diet while moonlighting at the DuPont company when he started his cardiology practice. The executives at the DuPont company were kept slim and trim on a restricted carbohydrate diet. Dr. Atkins tried this diet himself and lost a significant amount of weight, which convinced him that a low-carbohydrate diet was the cure for obesity. Chapter 2. The Diabetic Curse of My Family by Elizabeth Gahn. All too early in my youth, I learned about the horrible diseases of diabetes. A disease that first claims the limbs, eyesight, and then life itself. The horror was that the curse was in my family genes. The disease was so rampant in my family that no one seemed to question it. It was accepted that each of us was destined to get it at some point. There was no discrimination. My grandfather got it, my mother was diagnosed with it, and one by one, her brothers and sisters were diagnosed with the curse. Some got it worse than others, and some died too young from the ravages of the disease. My mother was a very strong, disciplined person. When she was diagnosed with the curse, she was determined not to let it beat her. The disease had already claimed the lives of several of her siblings, and another had lost his eyesight. She saw the doctor regularly, ate according to the diabetic guidelines, and faithfully injected her insulin every morning and evening. I often wondered if that was what was in store for my future. Maybe if I was lucky, the curse might skip me. Luck, because it seemed that there was no answer nor a cure. I remember on one occasion that my mother's physician found a needle in her foot. Due to the advanced neuropathy in her feet, something that commonly develops in diabetics, she did not feel the needle. Eventually, she developed sores on both her heels after being in the hospital with a broken hip. Somehow, no matter what they did for those sores, they never healed completely. When she was about 75 years of age, we got the dreaded news that her left foot had developed gangrene and her leg needed to be amputated at the knee. I asked myself, why? She had followed all the rules, taken her medication, and ate as instructed. Why? Well, we did not realize that neither the medication she was taking nor the insulin was curing her disease. The medication and the insulin were merely controlling the symptoms of her elevated blood sugar. The disease continued to progress. This was the way the curse functioned. My mother tried to look at the brighter side, if there was any, and comforted us by telling us that at least she still had her other leg. That comfort did not last long. Due to complications, her other leg also had to be amputated. She could walk with her prosthesis, but it was not the same since she had to depend on others for assistance, something that was very difficult for an independent woman. Our father became her main caretaker until she passed away in 2008. After her death, I looked around at my siblings and wondered who would be next in line for the curse. What has contributed to the rise of the diabetes curse? Simply put, we believe there is a direct correlation between obesity and diabetes. In the United States, our annual sugar consumption is 150 pounds per person, a significant increase from 120 pounds in 1955 and 20 pounds in 1900. We have become a nation of couch potatoes. Cooking at home has become a novelty. Even more alarming, as our nephew from Germany pointed out, we have a fast food place in almost every major intersection. When he said that, I felt insulted. How could he exaggerate that way? Somehow, I felt I needed to refute his misguided notion. So I set out to prove him wrong. Much to my shock, in our neighborhood's major intersection, there are 2 bagel shops, 2 hamburger joints, 2 pizza shops, 4 restaurants, and 2 ice cream yogurt shops. What an eye-opening experience. I realized fast food places were so common that I hadn't even noticed. So, did I escape the diabetes curse? From our research at the Diet of Hope, I realized the curse can be controlled. While we carry the diabetic genes, they are activated by what we eat. We have been eating a low-carbohydrate diet for the last 20 years, and I am healthy and free of diabetes. Our experience with our diabetic patients and my own health is that eating patterns are the determining factor. My health, my responsibility. Chapter 3. Health Statistics for USA from the Center for Disease Control, CDC. Obesity. 35% of U.S. adults are obese with a body mass index over 30%. Non-Hispanic blacks have an obesity rate of 49.5%, Hispanics 39.1%, and whites 34.3%. A total of 100 million people are obese out of a population of 315 million. In 2008, yearly medical costs associated with obesity were estimated at $147 billion because of higher incidence of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and cancer, especially breast and colon cancer. Childhood obesity has more than doubled in children and tripled in adolescents in the last 30 years. The percentage of children aged 6 to 11 who were obese increased from 7% in 1980 to 18% in 2010. The percentage of obese adolescents aged 12 to 18 increased from 5% to 18% over the same period. It is very likely that this will be the first generation with a lifespan shorter than their parents. Diabetes. Data from the American Diabetes Association in 2012 showed 29 million Americans are diabetic with an A1C greater than 6.5%. 8.1 million people were unaware that they were diabetic. 86 million people were pre-diabetic with an A1C between 5.7 and 6.4%. People aged 65 or older had a 25.9% incidence of diabetes. The complications associated with diabetes start at the pre-diabetic stage and include: diabetes is the leading cause for blindness and for kidney failure. 60% of lower leg amputations occur in diabetics. 70% have neurological problems, especially dissembling neuropathies. The risk of dementia doubles, and the risk for heart disease and stroke quadruples. The total estimated cost of diagnosed diabetes in 2012 was $245 billion, including $176 in direct medical costs and $69 billion in reduced productivity. American Diabetes Association. The costs of diagnosed diabetes in 2007 were estimated at $174 billion, an increase of 41% in just 5 years. People with diagnosed diabetes incur an average medical expenditure of about $13,700 per year. Care for people with diabetes accounts for more than 1 in 5 healthcare dollars in the U.S. Hypertension. 1 in 3 adults is estimated to have high blood pressure, 67 million. Only 47% of hypertensive patients have their blood pressures under control. In 2009, 34,800 deaths were related to hypertension. Direct medical costs for hypertension were estimated at $47 billion. Cholesterol. 71 million adults are thought to have a high LDL, the bad cholesterol, above 130 mg, which represents 1/3 of the adult population. According to medical guidelines, they should be on statin medications. However, less than half of these patients take statins, and only half of these patients reach their goal. Heart surgery, bariatric surgery, and angioplasty. Annually, close to 1 million patients undergo either bypass surgery or angioplasty. In 2009, 220,000 patients had bariatric surgery, an increase from 36,000 in 2000. Breast cancer, 230,000 new cases in 2009. Colon cancer, 142,000 new cases in 2007. All the above-mentioned diseases are called diseases of civilization. They are related to our present lifestyle and are largely absent in less developed societies. The answer to the diseases are not more medications or surgery. We need a radical change of our thinking and need to openly discuss what went wrong. Solutions are available. We must be able to stand up to the special interest groups, and especially the food and pharmaceutical industries. Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Every patient with a BMI above 30 should receive intensive in-house counseling or should be referred to a special program. The Diet of Hope program is highly effective in the treatment of obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and the metabolic syndrome. The Diet of Hope complements the primary care physicians in the treatment of their patients. The primary care physicians remain in charge of the overall care of their patients. Medicare has recently decided to concentrate on quality of care and cost effectiveness with their new guidelines. Physicians will be rewarded for providing quality of care and cost savings in the treatment of their patients. Diet of Hope provides quality care. Patients can lose significant weight, improve diabetes, high blood pressure, and lipid abnormalities simply by altering food intake and lifestyle quality. At the same time, most medications for diabetes, high blood pressure, and cholesterol abnormalities can be reduced or discontinued. Cost. The primary care physician benefits from our program. The patient's health improves and the cost of their care decreases. Chapter 4. Diet of Hope. Nearly 13 years ago, I first published results of an earlier version of Diet of Hope in a clinical journal of cardiology. 38 of my cardiology patients started on a low-carbohydrate diet. They all had serious heart disease and were overweight. When I told them no sugar, bread, cereals, rice, pasta, and potatoes for a year, they looked at me and asked what food was there left to eat. What about heart-healthy cereals or heart-healthy whole wheat? I told them to eat good proteins from meat, fish, and fowl. I also advised them to make sure they eat a lot of salads and non-starchy vegetables. Use good fats such as olive oil, canola oil, and fatty fish with omega-3 fat. They were instructed on the importance of portion control. When they were told they could have eggs for breakfast, they were incredulous. This was totally opposite of the official point of view. However, they trusted me. They had been my patients for years and they followed my advice. After a year, their average weight loss was 31 pounds, ranged 16 to 107 pounds. Triglyceride levels were lowered by 29.5% and HDL, good cholesterol, increased by 17.6%. These results cannot be achieved by medication. What is more, none of the patients experienced any heart problems during that year. It is difficult to spend the time it takes to teach and educate a patient on a proper lifestyle and diet when you have a busy cardiology practice. This is a difficult task for any physician. So, after I retired from my cardiology practice, I dedicated all my efforts to create a program teaching proper lifestyle and nutrition to patients and physicians alike. As Albert Einstein once said, happiness is not having all the luxuries in life, but being interested in something you can be enthusiastic about. My wife and I are very enthusiastic about our Diet of Hope. 10 years ago, my wife was chosen as the Minority Businesswoman of the Year, a national award. However, the business was not her true calling. She turned over her business to her brother, studied nutrition, and became a certified nutrition consultant. The Diet of Hope is about making an impact on those who need us the most. We studied the nutrition recommendations by our government and realized it was absolutely wrong for the majority of people. Obese and or diabetic patients do worse on a high carbohydrate diet. Whole wheat is not healthy. For example, animals are fattened with foods high in carbohydrates and humans respond the same way. Our experience taught us that diabetes can be prevented and sometimes reversed. Common thinking is, once a diabetic, always a diabetic. However, people are diabetics or early diabetics because of what they eat. Simply avoiding food that causes diabetes is sufficient. Unfortunately, the food causing diabetes is the exact food recommended by our government. Taking a pill or an injection will not cure diabetes. It's merely a window dressing. Typically, if a patient shows up at a doctor's office and is diagnosed with the disease, the doctor investigates the cause of the disease before he starts any treatment. Diabetics are not evaluated that way. We know what the cause is, but most physicians feel nothing can be done about it. We may as well as put the patient on medication. The power of the food and the pharmaceutical industry prevents logical thinking. Fortunately, there is a rapidly growing group of physicians organized in the Obesity Society and the American Bariatric Society. These associations promote a healthy, low-carbohydrate diet for the treatment of the disease of civilization, such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, gastric reflux, sleep apnea, and many more. The Diet of Hope is promoting a low-carbohydrate diet with a structured program to treat these common diseases. We want the program to be affordable. For this reason, we accept any insurance that accepts us. We help our patients manage their diseases by teaching them lifestyle changes, behavior modification, and proper nutrition. Patients on multiple medications need to be medically monitored. Frequently, medications need to be reduced, especially in diabetic and hypertensive patients. The primary care physician remains in charge of the overall care of the patient. We do not use gimmicks and do not sell any food or medications. On the contrary, we frequently reduce medications used by our patients, especially medications for diabetes, hypertension, and cholesterol. Most of our diabetic patients save thousands of dollars on their yearly medication bill. Chapter 5. The Diet of Hope provides the body with all the nutrients the body needs. Protein. A complete protein consists of 20 amino acids. 9 of those amino acids the body cannot create. They are considered essential. These amino acids need to be consumed on a regular basis. Most animal proteins are complete, meaning they contain all the essential amino acids. Egg protein is complete and easily digested. Many vegetable proteins are incomplete. Vegetarians need to eat a variety of vegetables to receive a complete set of amino acids. Good fats. Omega-3 and omega-6 are essential for the body. They must come from food. Omega-6 fats can be found in multiple foods. Omega-3 fats are mostly found in fatty cold water fish. However, we do not know how much omega-3 fats the body needs. A few grams per day are probably sufficient. People who dislike fish should consider taking fish oil supplements. Oil, such as olive oil and canola oil, omega-9 fats, should be a part of a healthy diet. Curiously, the new food plate doesn't mention fat at all. Vitamins. Deficiency of vitamin D is responsible for rickets, and vitamin B1 deficiency causes beriberi. While we know a lot about our minimum needs for vitamins, we don't know what the ideal dose is. Mega doses of vitamins are advertised by the vitamin industry with little scientific support behind their claims. Eggs and meats are full of vitamins. The vitamins meat and eggs do not provide are obtained by the generous consumption of greens and non-starchy vegetables. Phytonutrients are found in fruits and vegetables. Hundreds of these compounds have been identified and are felt to be important for our health. No standard exists, but eating plenty of vegetables is important. Carbohydrates. Our body can function without carbohydrates. There is no known minimum requirement for carbohydrates. Eskimos. The food industry knows how to mix carbohydrates with salt and fat to make the food irresistible and addictive. The business model of the food industry is to hook people on food which could not be done with natural food. Carbohydrates in the Diet of Hope program come from vegetables and some fruits. They are complex carbohydrates with a low glycemic index. The Diet of Hope provides all the food the body needs. We generally use no supplements or vitamins. Taking a daily multivitamin is optional. Vitamin D levels are frequently low in our patients' population. If sun exposure is not enough to raise the levels, vitamin D supplementation should be used. Also, for patients that cannot eat fish or dislike fish, we suggest they obtain their omega-3 fat from fish oil capsules or from concentrate of algae. Chapter 6. Diabetes. Dietary recommendations from our government and medical associations are not based on science but are a compromise statement agreed upon by multiple organizations. The Department of Agriculture publishes the recommendations. The mission of the department is to promote agriculture. Congress promotes special interest food. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, medical associations, and scientists are under pressure from the food and pharma industry. Congress decided that pizza is a vegetable because one slice of pizza contains 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. In my opinion, the epidemic of obesity and diabetes accelerated with the publication of the food pyramid. We call it the evil food pyramid. We were all supposed to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, cereal, and rice every day starting at age 2. A disastrous recommendation. The recommended carbohydrates were all refined carbohydrates with little nutritional value and a high glycemic index, entering our body stream within minutes as sugar. We also were told to restrict fat consumption, especially saturated fats. Dr. Reeves, a prominent professor from Stanford University, wrote an editorial in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1984. He wrote, "If the whole country adopts these recommendations, an epidemic of obesity and diabetes will occur." He was so right. The epidemic of diabetes, in my opinion, is clearly related to the excessive consumption of simple carbohydrates and sugar. If you don't eat fat, you compensate by eating more carbohydrates. Reducing carbohydrates and reintroducing fat is the first step to control diabetes. You are type 2 diabetic because of what you eat. Stay away from that food and your diabetes will improve. Why is no one stating the obvious? To quote Mark Twain one more time, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so." This is called cognitive dissonance. If you know for sure you're right, it would be a waste of time to study different options. Most physicians rely on expert opinion. We don't know what financial or other interests created his or her opinion. We must move from expert opinion to evidence-based medicine. The suggestion that we should eat a lot of carbohydrates is not based on science, but on politics. Our body does well without eating carbohydrates. We can live well without carbohydrates, but not without protein and fat. Carbohydrates are not essential for our body. For example, in the past, Eskimos had no access to carbohydrates. Their food consisted of 30% protein and 70% fat. They were healthy. They had no heart disease, no diabetes, no cancer, and they were slim and trim. Only after they gained access to modern food did they develop all diseases of modern civilization. Our government is helpless against the power of food and pharmaceutical industries. Members of Congress need to be elected. Food and pharma industries supply the necessary means. Our government continues to support the sugar, corn, and wheat industry with massive amounts of subsidies. Stopping those subsidies would reduce carbohydrate production and consumption. The pharmaceutical industry controls the treatment of diabetes. The industry has also convinced the general public that diets don't work for the treatment of diabetes. Their answer to diabetes is medication. If a patient sees a doctor and is found to have an elevated blood sugar, he is diagnosed with diabetes. Oftentimes, the doctor pays lip service to diets and then prescribes a pill. The medications never cure diabetes and they have significant side effects. As my diabetic mother-in-law often complained to me, "I took all my medications faithfully as recommended by my doctor. I checked my blood sugar several times a day. I adjusted my insulin dose, and now I lost my legs and my kidneys are failing. What kind of treatment is this?" One of the most prescribed medications are sulfonylureas. They never prolonged life. On the contrary, they may shorten life. They stimulated the pancreas to increase insulin production. They do not affect the underlying problem. They overstress the pancreas. The pancreas eventually gives up and the patient has to go on insulin. A study with 10,000 diabetic patients showed that control of blood sugar with medications such as sulfonylurea and insulin increased the death rate if blood sugar levels were lowered towards normal levels, according to study. It was not clear if this was related to intermittent low blood sugar or to the medications. A recent study from the VA hospitals showed that elderly patients on metformin and poorly controlled blood sugar that were given insulin in addition to metformin had an increased mortality. Obviously, the increased mortality was related to insulin. Recommendations for the treatment of diabetes with insulin and sulfonylureas now suggest not to lower blood sugar below 150 milligrams or AC of 7%. The diabetic patient remains at a substantial risk for all the diabetic complications. Diabetes with these medications cannot be cured nor controlled. Multiple new and very expensive medications have recently become available. No long-term data exists on their safety and effectiveness. The newest group of medications block the absorption of glucose in the kidneys, and glucose is eliminated through the urine. To me, it would make sense not to eat the glucose to start with. Only carbohydrate-restricted diets can lower blood sugar levels safely. The suggestion that we should get 60% of our calories from carbohydrates is suitable for somebody who is slim and exercises on a regular basis. However, these individuals are becoming a small minority. To tell a diabetic and obese person to consume 60% of their calories from carbohydrates, even if they are complex carbohydrates, is like promoting diabetes and obesity. Whole wheat is promoted as a complex carbohydrate. It has more nutrition than simple carbohydrates and therefore should be healthier. Whole wheat can be advertised as such as long as 50% of the wheat is whole wheat. The process of making modern bread is totally different from making bread in the old days. The grain kernels are ground into a powder, destroying all fibers. Salt and sugar are added to the process. Whole bread, when digested, releases glucose as fast as white bread. The glycemic index of most whole wheat bread is higher than that of sucrose or table sugar. Sucrose has to be split into glucose and fructose. Fructose has a glycemic index of 22. The sugar in whole wheat is mostly glucose and therefore has a high glycemic index. The American Diabetes Association has become a successful fundraising company. Their important commercial partners are Novo Nordisk, the biggest insulin producer, Eli Lilly, Sanofi, and the processed food giant Nestle. Almost all other food and pharma companies provide funds for the Diabetic Association. Their multi-million yearly donations give them a seat on the advisory group, the Banting Circle, and allows them to organize meetings for the Diabetic Association. Also, they can possibly influence how the money for research from the fundraising can be allocated. The mission of the Diabetic Association is to prevent, manage, and cure diabetes. How is this association doing? Prevention. The association clearly should get an F for their failure to prevent diabetes. The association is controlled by the food and pharma industry. The pharma industry wants permanent customers. They are neither interested in the prevention or cure for diseases. Manage qualifies for a D. Sugar can be controlled with very expensive medications. Medications do not affect the underlying metabolic problems for diabetes. Cure. Obviously, cure is not in sight. Let us look at the results of our present diabetes management. Over 248,000 diabetic patients are on dialysis. Diabetes is the leading cause for blindness and leg amputations. Some researchers consider Alzheimer's disease a complication of diabetes, diabetes type 3. Our present management for diabetes has failed many patients. At best, our treatment with medications of diabetes can delay complications but not prevent it. Far more research should go into dietary interventions. The Diabetes Association insists we should all eat at least 40 grams to 50 grams of carbohydrates with each meal. This is based on a faulty interpretation of a study done some 40 years ago. Our brain performs well with ketones that are produced when we metabolize our fat stores. The most important ketone body is a beta-butyric acid. It can calm our brain and has shown to reduce seizures in children on a ketogenic diet. The American Diabetes Association also supports a low-fat diet similar to the diet supported by the American Heart Association. Eating saturated fat has nothing to do with diabetes and based on recent multiple evidence-based studies doesn't cause heart disease either. I recently attended a conference on metabolism. The consensus was that a low-fat diet is a contraindicted in diabetics. The early stages of diabetes type 2 and type 1 are very different. Diabetes type 1 is a pancreatic disease. The pancreas quits making insulin. The only effective treatment is insulin. Even type 1 diabetics can do well on our program, especially if they are overweight. Avoiding carbohydrates lowers their need for insulin, a major saving. With lower insulin levels, they can lose weight. A few years ago, I met Dr. Bernstein, a type 1 diabetic. He was 80 years old. He developed early kidney disease and was a neuropath at age 40. At age 80, he was healthy and active. His treatment was nutrition. He avoids all simple carbohydrates, eats no fruits are overrated. He exercises on a regular basis and keeps close to control of his blood sugar with multiple small insulin injections. Preventing complications of diabetes is possible. The Diabetic Diet by Dr. Bernstein. Diabetes type 2 is totally different from diabetes type 1. In the early stages of their disease, type 2 diabetics have an elevated insulin level that lacks effectiveness. We call this insulin resistance. A cause of insulin resistance is dietary. The problem starts when our body continuously gets overloaded with sugar. Initially, insulin is able to channel glucose to our muscles, liver, and other organ systems. If a high glucose intake continues, the muscles and liver become reluctant to accept this large glucose load. This is the very early stage of diabetes. Our pancreas responds with an increased insulin production, forcing the body to accept the glucose load. Using insulin for a patient with already elevated insulin levels makes no sense. We can reverse insulin resistance with a low carbohydrate diet. Our table sugar consists of two molecules, fructose and glucose. Glucose is controlled by insulin. Fructose is metabolized by the liver. Too much fructose causes a fatty liver. A fatty liver causes insulin resistance. Prolonged overproduction of insulin eventually exhausts the pancreas and true diabetes develops. Most diabetics have high insulin levels at the beginning of their disease. To start sulfonylureas at this stage of the disease is wrong. The pancreas is already overproducing insulin, and adding insulin to the already elevated insulin levels makes no sense. The treatment should be to correct insulin resistance. The only effective treatment is restricting carbohydrates and exercise. Insulin can control blood sugar in two ways. It allows sugar to enter muscles, liver, and other organs. The storage capacity of these organs is limited somewhere around 1200 to 1500 calories in the form of glycogen. If the storage areas are full, insulin can convert glucose to triglycerides, fat, and store it in our fat tissues, mostly in our abdominal areas. Our fat tissue rarely becomes insulin resistant and always accepts the fat. Insulin controls our glucose levels in two ways, by storing the sugar in muscles and liver and by changing glucose to fat and sending it to our fat tissues. Elevated insulin levels prevent any release of fat from our fat tissue. So, eating a lot of carbohydrates increases insulin levels. Insulin creates a one-way street from sugar in our body to fat in our fat tissues. Obesity is the end result. Why is it so important to have normal blood sugar levels? Glucose has the tendency to bind with protein anywhere in the body and makes this protein non-functional. We call these glucose-protein connections advanced glycation end product, AGE. One of these glycation end products is hemoglobin, A1C. The higher the A1C, the more damage is done to the protein in our hemoglobin. Luckily, we replace our red cells every 2 or 3 months. This is how we can estimate our blood sugar levels of the preceding months. Unfortunately, not all protein is replaced every 2 or 3 months, and permanent damage can occur such as peripheral neuropathy, kidney, and eye damage. It is important to remember, those damages can occur at the pre-diabetic stage. The best treatments for these problems are low-carbohydrate diets, such as the diet of hope. Physicians and the public have been reluctant to accept the idea that diabetes can be reversed and prevented through a diet change. There is a strong belief, based on past experiences, that diets don't work in the long run. We beg to differ. We now have data from over 3,000 diabetics and pre-diabetic patients that have learned the importance of making changes in their eating habits. They have learned that certain food increases their blood sugar. Avoiding that food helps to control their diabetes. They have learned that diabetes can be conquered. People are diabetic because of what they eat. It's that simple. It will take time to convince our government and medical societies to change their recommendations. We probably will never hear an apology from the creators of the evil food pyramid. Changes in our preferences will take time. There is hope. The stocks of Coca-Cola and McDonald's are falling. Who can we trust with dietary guidelines? U.S. Congress? Michelle Obama worked hard to improve school lunches and got an agreement that a school lunch for federally supported schools should include 3 vegetables. However, the U.S. Congress, under heavy pressure from the food industry, voted last November a pizza containing at least 2 ounces of tomato paste was a vegetable and accepted that French fries were vegetables. food industry can continue to deliver their frozen pizzas and French fries to schools to the detriment of children's health. Heart Association? Judge yourself. For more than 50 years, the dogma of the low-fat, low-cholesterol, high-carbohydrate, heart-healthy diet became the gospel in nutrition. Eating saturated fat was felt to be the main cause for elevated cholesterol and heart disease. Last year in JAMA Internal Medicine, September 12, 2016, researchers from the University of California unearthed documents that described the successful efforts of the sugar industry to blame fat and not sugar for the epidemic of heart disease. They bribed 3 prominent Harvard physicians to twist and rearrange data so that the saturated fat and cholesterol could be blamed for health problems and not sugar. These leaders were dominant personalities and advised the Senate Committee on Nutrition and helped to create the first food guidelines from our government promoting low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. Those guidelines were not supported by honest science. There is no scientific evidence today that eating saturated fat causes heart disease, a conclusion from a major study published in March 2014 in the Annals of Internal Medicine. The Heart Association still recommends limiting eating saturated fat, unable to accept that the association was wrong for so long. Recent food guidelines published in 2015 agreed that eating cholesterol does not raise cholesterol. The liver adjusts cholesterol production based on cholesterol intake. Diabetic Association? The association was founded in 1940. The goals? Prevent diabetes, cure diabetes, improve the lives of all diabetics. What are the results of these efforts? The incidence of diabetes has increased 7-fold. There's no cure in sight. The lives of diabetics have not been improved. Statistics from the Diabetes Association from 2014 reveals that 248,000 diabetics are on dialysis. Cost of diabetes care, $275 billion. In 1992, Diabetic Association fully supported what I called the evil food pyramid. We should all eat at least 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, cereal, and rice every day, all carbohydrates. This is the worst possible diet for diabetics. Diabetics are defenseless against carbohydrates. Eating carbohydrates causes a marked and prolonged rise in blood sugar. The pharma industry is quick to help. The only effective treatment for diabetics is severely restricting carbohydrate intake, which frequently controls blood sugar without medications. The Diabetes Association has an advisory board called the Banting Circle. Minimum entrance fee, $1 million yearly. Big Pharma and Big Food are the main advisors. These companies promote their medications and their food. They are not interested in nutrition and they expect a return on their investment. Marcia Angel, MD, former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, made the following statement. Over the last 2 decades, the pharmaceutical industry has moved very far from its original purpose of discovering and producing useful new drugs. Now, primarily a marketing machine to sell drugs of dubious benefit, this industry uses its wealth and power to co-opt every institution that might stand in its way, including the U.S. Congress, the FDA, academic medical centers, and the medical profession itself. Chapter 7. Results of the Diet of Hope. My wife and I officially started the Diet of Hope over 6 years ago. 12,000 patients have started our program. 80% of those 12,000 finished our Phase 1 program. Phase 1 is an intensive program. Patients must be mentally ready to change their lives. The program is not for everyone. Patients are seen on a weekly basis. They are instructed what to eat every day. The food is simple and easy to prepare. For many patients who were accustomed to eating out every meal, Phase 1 is an adventure that expands their food horizon. During the first few days, patients addicted to carbohydrates may have some withdrawal symptoms. Weight loss for patients who finish the 6-week ranges from 5 to 17% of body weight. Weight loss is highly predictable. For this reason, patients who do not lose weight are told to read the diet instructions again. Weight loss is just a number. However, the health of our patients improves significantly and sometimes dramatically. For example, patients' personalities may change. They have more energy, diffuse body pains decrease, gastric reflux improves, they sleep better, and their brain seems to function better. Many patients return to thank us for giving them their life back. The patient can choose to continue Phase 1 long term. Phase 1 provides sufficient nutrition. Patients needing to lose more than 100 pounds are encouraged to stay on Phase 1 longer. After 6 to 12 weeks on Phase 1, most patients go on to Phase 2 of our program. What happens after Phase 1? Being successful in the first 6 to 12 weeks provides an enormous psychological boost to most patients. They understand the concept of the plan. They feel better. They suddenly are in control of their weight and their health. Phase 2 of the program allows an increased consumption of good fats and fruits. The overwhelming majority of patients still need to lose more weight. This program is very individualized. Interestingly, Medicare now allows 22 visits per year, as long as the patient shows progress. The administrators of Medicare realize that old habits and food addictions cannot be changed long-term with a few visits. Intensive behavior treatment has to be part of the program. Results after 1 year. 72% of patients either maintain their weight loss or lose more weight. Thousands of patients lost more than 25 pounds. Over 800 patients lost more than 50 pounds. Over 100 patients lost more than 100 pounds. And our star patient, Linda, lost over 240 pounds. 26% of patients gained some weight back, but never regained their previous weight. Some of those patients asked for another 6 weeks of Phase 1, feeling they needed the accountability and support. Only 2% of our patients regained all their weight, or sometimes more. What is Phase 3? Maintenance. Patients have reached their goal. They no longer need to lose weight and their medical problems have improved. They will be monitored on a as-need basis, usually once a year. Chapter 8. Results and successes of 3,900 patients treated by the Diet of Hope and followed for 6 weeks. Phase 1. All patients were overweight or obese with multiple other medical problems. 1,479 patients, or 37%, were pre-diabetic with an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4%. 774 patients, or 19.4%, were diabetic on oral medications or injections. A1C was above 6.5% or greater. 305 patients, or 7.6%, were diabetics on insulin with an A1C of 6.5% or greater. 1,342 patients, or 33.6%, were non-diabetic. The percentages of patients with diabetes or prediabetes parallels the frequency of diabetes and prediabetes in the general population. The results are reported after patients have been treated for 6 weeks in the Phase 1 program. Improvements of diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol, and weight continues in the follow-up period. Most patients require intermittent follow-up for at least 1 year. Medicare approves 22 visits per year if the patient loses at least 6.5 pounds and improves his or her health. Pre-diabetic patients, 1,479 patients. 67% normalized A1C. A1C dropped below 5.7%. 60.4% were hypertensive. 45.8% stopped or reduced hypertensive medication. Despite the reduction of medication, systolic blood pressure dropped 4.3% and diastolic blood pressures dropped 4.6%. Average cholesterol reduced 10.3% and triglycerides dropped 20.2%. HDL rose 5.9%. Average weight loss was 17.6 pounds or 7.9% of body weight. Diabetics on oral medications or injections with Byetta or Victoza, 774 patients. A1C dropped 14.1%. 32% stopped diabetic medications and 36.9% reduced diabetic medications. 69.5% were hypertensive. 56% stopped or reduced hypertensive medication. Despite reductions of hypertensive medications, systolic blood pressure dropped 4.7% and diastolic blood pressure dropped 5.1%. Average cholesterol reduced 9.2% and triglycerides dropped 17.5%. HDL rose 2.2%. Cholesterol medications were reduced or discontinued in 18.3% of patients. Average weight was 18.1 pounds or 7.8% of body weight. Type 2 diabetics on insulin and other diabetic medications, 305 patients. 305 insulin-dependent type 2 diabetic patients successfully finished our 6-week program, Phase 1. To avoid hypoglycemic and hypotensive reactions, temporary changes of medications are necessary. Some patients need a substantial reduction in their insulin dose within days of changing their diet. Changes on day 1. We stop regular insulin. We stop long-acting insulin at night and gradually reduce the remaining dose during the 6 weeks. We stop all sulfonylureas to avoid hypoglycemic reactions. We stop most diuretics. Eliminating refined carbohydrates produces a spontaneous diuresis, potentially lowering blood pressure. We stop all triglyceride-lowering medications. Elevated triglycerides are most of the time related to excessive consumption of refined carbohydrates. Our diet doesn't include refined carbohydrates. Results: 42% of patients could stop insulin completely. 58% of patients reduced their insulin dose substantially. Experts say once a patient is on insulin, generally, they will always be on insulin. Not true. People are diabetics because of what they eat. All patients lost weight. Average weight loss was 25 pounds or 10.3% of their body weight. Average triglyceride levels changed from 203 milligrams to 184 milligrams or a 9% reduction. All 11 patients on triglyceride-lowering medications were taken off the medication. Despite of all the reduction of insulin doses, A1C improved substantially. Before the diet was started, the average A1C was 8%. At the end of 6 weeks, it lowered to 6.8%. Non-diabetic but obese with either hypertension or metabolic syndrome, 1,342 patients. 59.8% of the hypertensive patients reduced or stopped blood pressure medications. Systolic blood pressures lowered 4.2% and diastolic blood pressure 4%. Cholesterol lowered 8.8%, triglycerides lowered 22.5%, and HDL rose 8.2%. Average weight loss was 16.6 pounds or 7.6% of body weight. Chapter 9. Long-term excellent results in the treatment of insulin-dependent type 2 diabetics. 1-year follow-up. We could follow 67 insulin-dependent diabetics type 2 for an average of 1 year. Their average age was 62 years. All 67 patients were obese, 59 patients, or overweight, 8 patients. 52 patients, 75%, were hypertensive. 49 patients, 73%, had cholesterol or triglyceride abnormalities. Results after the first 6 weeks. 24 patients on long-acting insulin stopped insulin, 37%. 40 patients reduced long-acting insulin, 62%. All 25 patients on short-acting insulin stopped insulin. All patients on sulfonylureas stopped the medications. Average weight loss was 20 pounds or 8% of body weight. Average daily combined insulin dose, long-acting and short-acting, per patient was 107 units at the beginning of the program and decreased to 25 units. Average A1C decreased 1.3% despite of the marked reduction of insulin. 1 year later, 22 of the 24 patients who came off long-acting insulin during Phase 1 remained off insulin. 32 out of 40 patients who could reduce long-acting insulin during Phase 1 remained on their reduced dosages. 4 fully stopped insulin. 4 increased their dosages. 22 of the 25 patients who stopped short-acting insulin during Phase 1 remained off short-acting insulin. All patients stayed off sulfonylurea drugs. Insulin cost analysis. 1 vial of insulin contains usually 1,000 units. The cost of 1 vial of Lantus insulin quoted by Tucson pharmacies is $225 and for Levemir $289. Novolog and Humalog vials cost $214. Using the more convenient FlexPen insulin, the cost per vial goes up by $50 to $100. Each Diet of Hope patient, on average, used a total of 107 units of short and long-acting insulin combined daily. The combined monthly dose of insulin for all 67 patients, 67 times 107 times 30 was 215,070 units of insulin. If we assume the average cost of a vial of insulin, 1,000 units, is $250, then the 67 patients spent $53,768 on insulin per month, or $803 per patient. After 1 year on the diet of hope, the average combined insulin dose was reduced from 107 units to 33 units. Using the above calculation again, the cost per month per patient was reduced from $803 down to $248. The cost for all 67 patients was $16,616, a monthly saving of $37,152. This correlates to a yearly saving of $445,824 for 67 patients, or $6,654 per patient. A dietary program is usually judged by its 1-year success rate. The Diet of Hope produced astonishing results. Once patients realize that the food they are eating causes diabetes and they can control their diabetes by changing what they are eating, they have hope again to control their life and escape the dreadful destiny of the diabetic disease. Inevitably, patients become highly motivated to stay or come off insulin. They realize insulin is not a cure for diabetes. It only delays the complications of diabetes. Currently, 228,000 diabetics are on dialysis. Most of those patients were on insulin before. As physicians, we must rethink our approach to diabetes. Starting diabetic patients on medications as an initial treatment is wrong. Lifestyle change is the answer and should always be the first approach. Our data indicate that diabetes type 2 can be prevented and frequently reversed. The answer to the epidemic of diabetes is for people to change the type of food they're eating, avoid simple carbohydrates, including whole wheat, refuse to eat processed food, increase their intake of non-starchy vegetables, overcome their fear of eating eggs and good fats. Metformin. Most Diet of Hope patients are taking metformin when they begin the program and they have questions about the drug. According to reports on the internet, it is considered to be dangerous and has multiple side effects. We disagree. It is the most commonly prescribed medication for diabetics. It is also prescribed to prevent diabetes in patients at risk for diabetes. It is also used in the treatment of polycystic ovary syndrome and in weight gain due to medications used for treating psychosis. Possible side effects are nausea, bloating, and diarrhea. It has been used as weight loss medication because it can suppress appetite. A serious but a rare side effect of metformin is lactic acidosis. Lactic acidosis is an accumulation of lactic acid in our blood that potentially can be lethal. Patients with chronic renal failure are generally told not to use metformin because of an increased risk of lactic acidosis. Metformin is eliminated through the kidneys. However, a recent review in the Journal of the American Medical Association suggests that patients with mild to moderate renal disease can use metformin safely. Unlike medications such as sulfonylureas, metformin does not increase the concentration of insulin in the blood and therefore does not cause excessively low blood sugar when used alone. Metformin can potentially reduce the complications of diabetes such as heart disease, blindness, and kidney disease. Metformin increases insulin sensitivity and it can improve the effectiveness of insulin. Insulin resistance is commonly found in the early stages of diabetes. Our liver can produce glucose from protein. Diabetics know that their blood sugar when going to bed may be normal, but the blood sugar can be significantly elevated in the morning without eating any food at night. Metformin can significantly reduce glucose production from the liver. We generally maintain patients on metformin even after their diabetes has markedly improved. Insulin resistance is probably the last diabetic problem that goes away on our program. Chapter 10. New Guidelines for the Treatment of High Blood Pressure, Hypertension. Hypertension is the most common condition seen in primary care and leads to myocardial infarction, stroke, renal failure, and death if not detected early and treated appropriately. The Joint National Committee, JNC, recently published new guidelines for the treatment of high blood pressure. Age 20 to 60, no treatment if blood pressure is 140/90 or less. Age 60 and above, no treatment if blood pressure is 150/90 or less. Diabetics, no treatment if blood pressure is 140/90 or less. Non-diabetics with chronic kidney disease, no treatment if blood pressure is 140/90 or less. These new guidelines are evidence-based rather than based only on expert opinion as in the past. There is strong evidence to support treating hypertensive persons age 60 or older to a BP goal of less than 150/90. There is also strong evidence to support treating persons aged 30 through 59 to a diastolic goal of less than 90 mmHg. There is insufficient evidence for a systolic goal. This is a radical change from previous recommendations. In the past, it was thought the lower the blood pressure, the better. More than 200 experts and multiple organizations and committees have reviewed and approved these recommendations. A sizable minority disagree. Interestingly, using the new guidelines, most patients have been significantly overtreated. Some physicians are still not convinced that the new guidelines are correct. Physicians have clearly and unequivocally been given different guidelines for the last 40 years. We'll see what the next guidelines show. Regardless of the new guidelines, the Diet of Hope is highly effective in the treatment of hypertension. Following this program, medications for hypertension can frequently be reduced or discontinued. This should be the first defense against hypertension. In the next chapter, we present our data showing that following our program frequently eliminates the need for medication. Chapter 11. Diet of Hope program helps lower blood pressure. One of the common criticisms of the low-carbohydrate diet is that patients are only losing water. This argument obviously doesn't hold up a patient losing 50 or 100 pounds. There is no question that people on a low-carbohydrate diet lose mostly salt and water in their first week, which leads to a lower blood pressure. Rather than asking why people lose salt and water on a low-carbohydrate diet, which is a good thing, the establishment in favor of the low-fat diet used this finding as a negative. What is really happening? Insulin not only affects our blood sugar, but also affects the kidney functions. High insulin blood levels and high glucose levels interfere with our kidneys' normal function and promote salt and water retention. Salt and water retention raises our blood pressure. Lowering the effect of insulin on our kidneys and lowering blood sugar will lower our blood pressure. Our results. Out of our 500 most recent patients, 247 carried the diagnosis of hypertension and were on diuretics and multiple other blood pressure medications. Systolic blood pressure. Average systolic blood 126.4 mmHg pressure before the diet. After 6 weeks, 120.8 mmHg. Total difference 4.6%. Diastolic blood pressure. Average diastolic blood pressure 78.3 mmHg before the diet. After 6 weeks, 74.5 mmHg. Total difference 4.8%. The patient's blood pressure before they started on our program was obviously controlled with their medications, but improved without medications. All 247 patients eliminated or reduced at least one blood pressure medication. 70 patients were on diuretics. 62 patients stopped their diuretics. 8 patients reduced their dose. Beta blockers were specifically targeted for lowering because they were known to cause mild weight gain. Despite all the reductions in medications during the 6 weeks, patients' blood pressure at the end of the program was still significantly lower compared to the starting blood pressure. Starting a low-carbohydrate diet should be the first step in treatment of high blood pressure. Chapter 12. Cholesterol and the Diet of Hope. Eating saturated fat and cholesterol has been singled out as the main culprit in elevating blood cholesterol levels and causing heart disease over the last 40 years. The Diet of Hope does not use statin medications to lower cholesterol. Statins inhibit the function of a liver enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase. This enzyme simulates cholesterol production. Insulin stimulates the same enzyme and promotes cholesterol production. Lowering insulin levels in our blood lowers cholesterol production. The effects of the diet of hope on cholesterol levels on our last 500 patients. Cholesterol type, starting levels, and then after 6 weeks. Cholesterol, 184.1, after 6 weeks, 161.4. LDL cholesterol, 96.5 versus 88.3. Triglycerides, 178.5 versus 142.8 after 6 weeks. This data shows a significant improvement of all lipid levels. All patients on fibrates were taken off the medication at the beginning of the program, 11 patients. 21 patients lowered or discontinued statin medications. In my opinion, statin medications are overprescribed. The Diet of Hope program lowers cholesterol levels and is especially effective in lowering triglyceride levels. Statins are medications used to lower cholesterol. At present, 7 statin medications are available: Livalo, Crestor, Zocor, Pravachol, Lipitor, Mevacor, and red yeast rice or lower dose of lovastatin. The most potent statins are Livalo and Crestor. But all statins work the same. They block all enzymes in the liver called HMG-CoA, reductase. This also blocks or reduces the production of coenzyme Q10, important for energy production primarily in mitochondria. The highest concentration is in heart, liver, and kidneys. CoQ10 levels can decrease as much as 40% while on statins. Some physicians routinely prescribe CoQ10 routinely for patients taking statin to try to decrease the side effects. It is believed that statins can reduce coronary artery disease, but the mechanism is not yet clear. Reducing cholesterol has always been perceived to be the main mechanism. Lowering inflammation with statins was felt to be possibly responsible for lowering heart disease in a more recent study, Jupiter study. There is a long list of side effects associated with statin therapy. Muscle weakness and muscle pain are the most common complaints. In the past, when patients used a combination of statins and gemfibrozil, rhabdomyolysis was a dreaded complication frequently leading to kidney failure from the release of muscle enzymes. Most patients with muscle pain have no enzyme elevation. Supplementation with CoQ10 sometimes helps. In the original scientific studies, muscle pain was reported 5 to 10% of the patients. In the real world, the complaint is as high as 40%. Diabetes related to statin use has only recently reported. It was estimated that in the shorter follow-up studies that diabetes occurred in 2% of treatment patients. The pharmaceutical industry downplayed these findings, claiming that diabetes in these patients would have developed anyhow. They were probably already pre-diabetic. More recent, more long-term suggests that the incidence of diabetes in statin-treated patients is as high as 9%. Statins increased LDL receptors in the liver that collect cholesterol inside the liver cell. Pancreatic beta cells producing insulin also increased LDL receptors driving cholesterol inside the cell. Too much intracellular cholesterol is toxic to the insulin-producing cells. A long list of other side effects from statins have been reported. Nerve pain, impotence, confusion, brain fog, fatigue, liver damage, shortness of breath, weakened immune system, depression, increased risk of cancer. At least 59 million Americans take statin medications. Based on the new guidelines, more people should take it. Safety and efficacy of statins have been exaggerated, says Dr. Ravenscoff and Dr. Diamond from the University of South Florida. The effect of drugs on the population is called the absolute risk. For example, if 100 patients take a statin pill, 1 out of 100 patients develop a heart attack. Of 100 patients taking a sugar pill, 2 have a heart attack. The absolute risk reduction is 1%. Clearly not very effective. The pharmaceutical industry uses a trick, the relative risk reduction. If 2 of 100 patients in a placebo pill have a heart attack and only 1 patient of 100 on the statin drug, that's considered an amazing 50% reduction of relative risk in the treated group. Who wouldn't want to be on that pill? The ASCA LLA study was terminated early because of outstanding successes. There were 3% of heart attacks and death in the placebo group, and 1.9% in the Lipitor group, an improvement of 1.1% in the treatment group. With the magic of the relative risk, this was transformed in a 30% risk reduction in heart attack risk. The reduction of heart attacks in the Jupiter study was less than 1%, which translated in a 54% relative risk reduction. The inflated claims of effectiveness and minimizing of side effects have allowed the pharmaceutical industry and their supporters to push the statins on an unsuspecting public. 2 new cholesterol-lowering medications, Proluent and Regeneron, got recently approved. They can lower the bad cholesterol, LDL, up to 60%. They are monoclonal antibodies. They bind and inactivate a protein in the liver called PCSK9. No long-term studies showing a significant decrease of heart disease are available. The drug is expensive, costing roughly $14,000 per year. Chapter 13. Diet of Hope improves kidney function. GFR, glomerular filtration rate, is the best test to measure or estimate kidney function. It is calculated from the results of blood creatinine test, age, gender, body size, and race. Chronic kidney disease, CKD, is divided in 5 stages. Stage 1, normal kidney function, GFR 90 or above. Stage 2, mild kidney damage, GFR 60 to 89. Stage 3, mild to moderate damage, GFR 30 to 59. Stage 4, severe loss of kidney function, GFR 15 to 29. Stage 5, kidney failure, GFR below 15. It is calculated from the results of blood creatinine test, age, gender, body size, and race. GFR, glomerular filtration rate, is the best test to measure or estimate kidney function. In 2011, a patient was referred to us for the treatment of diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. She also had moderate kidney disease with a glomerular filtration rate of 45. After successfully improving diabetes, hypertension, and obesity over a 3-month period, her glomerular filtration rate improved from 45 to 80. One of my 91-year-old cardiology patients came to me for help. He had a body mass index of 22 and his glomerular filtration rate was 17. He was told he needed a dialysis soon. Obviously, he did not need to lose weight. By changing his diet, reducing his carbohydrate intake, increasing his protein and fat intake, his GFR improved from 17 to 28 in 1 month. His weight remained stable and his GFR stayed at 28 for over a year. The successful results of these 2 patients prompted us to evaluate our diet of hope in the treatment of patients with CKD3 and 4. 500 consecutive patients were evaluated for chronic kidney disease. 33 patients had CKD 3 and 4 based on the results from their nephrologist. CKD 3, 28 patients. CKD 4, 5 patients. There's still this misconception, especially with physicians, that a low-carbohydrate diet is automatically a high-protein diet. This goes back to the Atkins diet, which was a high-protein and high-fat diet. Our Diet of Hope diet is a normal protein diet. The minimum amount of protein the body needs has been calculated at 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. For someone weighing 200 pounds, they need at minimum 72 grams of protein. Doubling this amount of protein in healthy patients has never produced any health problems. Patients with CKD5 may have problems to eliminate the waste products of protein metabolism. They should stay with the minimum amount of protein intake. Our patients with CKD3 and 4 received 0.5 grams of protein per day. All 33 patients improved their GFR. Average improvement of GFR was 25.5%. Serum serotonin decreased by an average of 13.7%. Average weight loss was 23.8 pounds or 10.2% of body weight. Data from the National Kidney Foundation suggested that 43.8% of kidney failures are related to diabetes and 26.8% are related to hypertension. The Diet of Hope markedly improves diabetes despite of reducing or discontinuing insulin and other diabetic medications. Hypertension frequently improves within the first week of our program. Reducing carbohydrates usually causes a significant diuresis during the first week, which lowers blood pressure. The present long-term treatment of type 2 diabetes with medications has not stopped the complications associated with diabetes. In the year 2011, based on the data from the Kidney Foundation, 228,924 patients with kidney failure from diabetes were living on dialysis. Diet of Hope can improve diabetes and hypertension without medications, the two main risk factors for kidney disease. Our study was just published in the journal Diabetes, Metabolism, and Control. Chapter 14. Diet of Hope and Inflammation. Asthma, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, gastroesophageal reflux, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome. Headaches are caused by inflammation. Inflammation can be triggered by so-called pro-inflammatory cytokines released by our fat tissue. Cytokines are cell-signaling protein molecules of our immune system. Interleukin is a common cytokine that is frequently elevated in our patients with diabetes and obesity. Our fat tissues are metabolically very active and produce and secrete multiple enzymes and hormones that influence our whole body. Interleukin-6 can cause inflammatory reaction in multiple organ systems. It also stimulates the production of CRP, C-reactive protein, in our liver. Both interleukin-6 and CRP are risk factors for coronary and artery disease. Most of our patients successful in our program notice major decrease of all inflammatory problems. Gastroesophageal reflux. At least 90% of patients get relief of their symptoms. Irritable bowels. Most patients show improvement. Our diet is gluten and lactose-free, which might explain the improvement in some patients. Osteoarthritis almost always improves after significant weight loss. Asthma and inflammation of the bronchial tree. Most patients can reduce their medications. Migraine headaches. Some patients show dramatic improvements. Fibromyalgia. Diffuse body pains frequently improve. 56-year-old patient with migrating polyarthritis. From 2006 to 2008, this patient had 4 unexplained fractures of metatarsal bones in both feet. The rheumatologist felt she had probably rheumatoid arthritis, but her blood work was negative and her bone density was normal. Over the next few years, she developed migrating polyarthritis treated with Plaquenil and a multitude of other arthritis medications. She became severely restricted in her activities, gained weight, and developed diabetes. She started the Diet of Hope program in May 2014. All her pains and joint swellings disappeared within 3 weeks of starting the diet. A year later, she remains pain-free, has lost 56 pounds, and is no longer diabetic and is fully active. Chapter 15. The benefits of the Diet of Hope. 1. You will get your health back. 2. You're guaranteed to lose weight if you follow the program. 3. Your triglycerides will lower substantially. 4. Your good cholesterol will increase, HDL. 5. Your bad cholesterol, LDL, will change to the more benign fluffy form. 6. Inflammation in your body will decrease, C-reactive protein. 7. For men, testosterone levels will rise. 8. Acid reflux will improve. 9. Arthritis frequently improves. 10. Asthma frequently improves. 11. You will feel more energetic and may even want to exercise. 12. Your self-image improves, thereby decreasing depression. 13. You will not be hungry despite eating half the portions from before. 14. If you're a diabetic, you will be able to lower some of your expensive medications. 15. Despite less diabetic medications, your A1C will improve. 16. Some diabetics will be able to reverse their disease. 17. You take control of your health. Photos of our patients. Linda, our star patient. Diet of Hope is a lifestyle change of healthy eating. Each day is better than the last. Just believe in yourself. Take one day at a time, and if you fall off, just make sure to get back on. I had many health problems. My blood pressure, high blood sugar, and cholesterol have now normalized. I hope my story inspires many people. Linda. Over the last 2 years, Linda has lost over 240 pounds. Our star family. When my wife and I learned about the Diet of Hope and went to the seminar, we thought it was too good to be true. We agreed that we could do anything for 6 weeks. The rewards were fantastic. My wife is no longer pre-diabetic. I am no longer taking insulin. We lost weight for the first time in our lives, not to mention the other meds we got rid of. You are what you eat, and we are living proof. Thanks to the Diet of Hope lifestyle change. Glenn and Georgia. Satisfaction. At the end of our 6-week Phase 1 program, we ask our patients to fill out a questionnaire and rate our program on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being excellent. Of the 4,250 patients, 97% gave us a 5 rating, 2.8% a 4 rating, and 8 patients rated the program a 3. Now, over 900 physicians or nurse practitioners in Tucson refer patients to us. 83 local physicians and nurse practitioners were patients in our program. Most of these physicians and nurse practitioners have achieved long-term success. Quotes from our patients from a questionnaire. I feel I got another chance in life. I feel very blessed to be part of this program. The program exceeded all my expectations. I will stay on this program for the rest of my life. It works and doesn't cost an arm and a leg. The program works because it makes sense. It is medically and scientifically sound. I thought I knew it all. Now the light is on. This is not a diet. It's a life change. I never felt hungry. The program is easy to follow and affordable. My joints don't hurt anymore and the swelling is gone. I got my life back. Better than any program I have been on. This program addresses health, not just weight. This program deserves more than a 5. It is a 10. I got my dignity back. Chapter 16. Longevity and Calories. Some people eat to live, and others live to eat. We all want to live a long, healthy life and die peacefully of old age in our sleep. Multiple diets exist. They all have the same goal, a long and healthy life. There is a common denominator between successful diets, be it a low-fat diet, a low-carb diet, vegetarian diet, the Mediterranean diet. They all avoid sugar and refined carbohydrates. A calorie-restricted diet is another approach. Roy Walford, a pathology professor at UCLA, wrote a book, The Retardation of Aging and Disease by Dietary Restriction in 1988. He showed in experiments with mice that severe calorie restrictions can double their lifespan. These experiments were repeated with many animal species and rendered similar results. Walford was the medical leader of an experiment at the biosphere near Tucson. 8 scientists lived for 2 years in the enclosed biosphere, eating only from what they could produce. It was all plant food. The production of food was less than expected, and all 8 scientists went on a calorie-restricted diet. In addition, the diet was low in protein and fat. They felt miserable and were hungry all the time. While they lost weight, lowered their cholesterol and blood pressure, they eventually needed food from the outside world. Dr. Walford died at age 79 from ALS. Further animal studies later showed that calorie restrictions accelerates ALS. Rhesus monkeys are genetically closely related to humans. A 14-year study on rhesus monkeys at the University of Wisconsin-Madison compared 2 groups of monkeys. One was allowed unlimited monkey chow and the other group was given 30% less of what they could usually eat. The food was nutritious. The calorie-restricted group maintained superior health. They had a 3-fold reduction in age-related diseases. 40% of the monkeys in the control group developed diabetes or prediabetes. No monkey in the control group developed either. 87% of the monkeys on a restricted diet were alive at the end of the study compared to 63% of the monkeys on unrestricted diets. In contrast to the conclusion reached at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a similar study performed by the National Institute of Aging, NIA, found no survival benefits with calorie restriction. However, they did not use the same monkey chow. The NIH monkeys received more carbohydrates. Now, the 2 groups of scientists need to go back to the drawing board and decide what is a healthy diet for monkeys in captivity. Nathan Pritkin founded the Longevity Center in California in 1975. His mission was to reduce heart disease and prolong a healthy life with a vegetarian diet and exercise. He advocated that only 5 to 10% of calories should come from fat, 10 to 15% from protein, and 75% to 85% from carbohydrates. At age 69, he developed leukemia and committed suicide. Dealing with one issue may create another problem. Data from the Nurses' Health Study showed women who consumed more fat, included saturated fat, had a lower incidence of breast cancer. In Pritkin's days, we did not know much about the good and essential fats. Omega fats. a diet too low in fat may not be healthy. How many calories does our body need daily? While this is a simple question, it lacks a straight answer. Using 4 different calculators assessed on the internet, they all suggested I should eat between 2,500 calories to 2,700 calories per day. If I eat more than 1,500 calories, I gain weight. Of course, the calculator also tells me at least 60% of my calories should come from carbohydrates. If you avoid simple carbohydrates, our body probably doesn't need more than 1,500 calories. During the war, Ancel Keys fed a group of conscious objectors what was considered a starvation diet of 1,500 calories, mostly in the form of cheap carbohydrates. They all lost weight and felt miserable. They also lost a significant amount of muscle and lean tissue. After the end of the study, they all gained their weight back. This was one of the studies that convinced people diets don't work. What Keys missed was that carbohydrates do not provide sufficient nutrition. These poor individuals were actually starving. If they would have received sufficient protein and fat, they might have been happy with 1,200 calories. The average daily calorie consumption in women in 1970 was 1,542 calories. In the year 2000, it increased by 335 calories to 1,877 calories. The average consumption by men in 1970 was 2,450 calories and increased 168 calories to 2,618 calories. The increase in calories was mostly due to increased carbohydrate consumption, especially sweetened beverages. Certainly, women in 1970 on 1,542 calories were not starving. They were healthier. Maybe that is the adequate amount of calories for women as long as they receive enough protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals. We need to go back to the basics. Our body needs protein, good fats, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients from vegetables. Carbohydrates are optional. The only effective treatment for obesity is reducing carbohydrates, including healthy whole wheat. On average, I have consumed 1,500 calories per day for the last 15 years, and I exercise an hour a day. I don't feel starved. We should rethink our calorie needs. Differing opinions on calorie needs. Barry Sears promoted his Zone diet in 1995. His diet was composed of 30% protein, 30% fat, and 40% carbohydrates. He calculated the body's protein need based on lean body weight. His diet was promoted heavily on cardiology meetings. When I did my calculations, my body needed 1,200 calories per day. Many people would consider this a starvation diet, but it is not. Hjalmar Stevenson, an Arctic explorer, did his year-long dietary experiment at a New York hospital eating an Eskimo diet, fat and meat. His diet consisted of 30% protein and 70% fat. He stayed healthy. However, when the investigators tried to reduce his fat intake, he developed severe diarrhea. He consumed close to 3,000 calories and did not gain weight. So, like always, when we deal with nutrition, there are differing opinions. Intermittent fasting is becoming popular. A 24-hour fast obviously reduces calorie intake. It also produces a mild state of ketosis, indicating that the body's metabolism has changed to metabolize fat, therefore causing extra weight loss. Prolonged fasting causes loss of muscle. Chapter 17. Obesity. Not all cases of obesity are caused by dietary factors. Genetics play a role. We all have seen women with big hips and small upper bodies, or men with spindly legs and big bellies. Obesity frequently runs in families. Women and men have different fat distribution, presumably related to our sex hormones. There is the famous report of a 12-year-old girl burning her hand. She was treated with a skin transplant from her abdomen. At age 28, when she grew quite obese, her hand ballooned with fat, requiring liposuction. This suggests that local factors in fat cells are involved in fat accumulation. The present obesity epidemic is clearly related to the excessive consumption of carbohydrates. The recommendation from our government, USDA, and medical societies to consume 60% of our calories from carbohydrates is not only wrong, but it is a part of the obesity problem. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid has recently released new guidelines for the treatment of obesity. Physicians can now treat obesity as a serious medical problem. This is a major reversal of previous policies. The American Medical Association has declared that obesity is a disease. This will place pressure on insurance companies to pay for the treatment of obesity. Physicians are urged to address obesity at every patient's visit. Moreover, electronic medical records now require documentation of a patient's body mass index, BMI. A BMI is a number derived from dividing a person's weight by their height squared in the metric system. BMI, 20 to 25, normal, 25 to 30, overweight, 30 to 40, obese, greater than 40, morbidly. The numbers were developed by the insurance industry. For example, if one's BMI is above 45, then according to insurance statistics, life expectancy will be shortened by at least 15 years. Obesity rates are soaring. In the US, childhood obesity has more than doubled in the last 30 years and has tripled in adolescence. Non-Hispanic blacks have the highest age-adjusted rates of obesity, 49.5%, compared with Mexican Americans, 39.4%. Worldwide, obesity has nearly doubled since 1980. It is not just a US problem. This year, Mexico's population has become overall heavier than the US population. At least the Mexican government responded to the epidemic of obesity with a soda tax and tax on certain snacks. In addition, First Lady Michelle Obama was trying to address childhood obesity. She was outfoxed by the food industry. French fries are now considered vegetables, and by congressional decree, pizza is a vegetable too, simply because one slice of pizza has 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Children are supposed to be served 3 to 5 vegetables a day. Causes for obesity epidemic are multiple. The National Institute of Health, NIH, states the obvious. Overweight and obesity happen over time when you take in more calories than you use. The real question is, why do we eat more than we need? Later in the book, we will discuss how the old theory of a calorie is a calorie doesn't hold up anymore. Our body responds to carbohydrates differently than to protein and fat. Carbohydrates make you fat. Fat doesn't make you fat. Any farmer taking care of cows and pigs knows the secret of fattening animals is feeding them corn and soy. We know that women over the last 30 years increased their daily calorie intake by 335 calories and men by 168 calories. Almost all of these extra calories came from carbohydrates. Our government still insists that 60% of our calories should come from carbohydrates. Our eating behavior and our food environment have changed dramatically over the last 40 years. We don't have to cook anymore. Fast food restaurants are at every corner, providing us with inexpensive foods thanks to the subsidies from our governments. This fast food is unhealthy because it is full of sugar and fat produced in factories. Some of the fat in fast food is trans fat, well known to cause heart disease. Supersizing a meal is another trick of the food industry to make consumers believe they got a good deal. The food industry still makes money, again because of the subsidies they received from the government. In other words, taxpayers cover the cost. The food is tasty for more people and addictive for some. The food industry knows how to mix sugar, fat, salt, and texture that the food becomes a treat for our pleasure center. The nucleus accumbens. The result is that we want more. What is more, fast food and sodas are advertised incessantly. Young children are especially easy prey. Advertising works. The lack of exercise is frequently quoted as an explanation for obesity. I explain my position in the chapter on exercise. I don't believe it plays a major role. Overconsumption of cheap, refined carbohydrates is the true culprit. Obesity is associated with a higher incidence of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, cancer, metabolic syndrome, and depression. Estrogen and LPL. I was always surprised that most American women gained weight after a hysterectomy. To my knowledge, the uterus doesn't produce any significant hormones. Then I discovered that most surgeons in this country remove the ovaries at the same time. Ovaries produce estrogen. Estrogen influences a hormone called LPL. If LPL is attached to a fat cell, it will open channels that facilitate the entry of fat into fat cells. Estrogen inhibits LPL. It prevents fat accumulation. After an ovarectomy, estrogen levels fall and LPL remains uninhibited. Thus, fat accumulation occurs. Gaining weight after an ovarectomy is a hormonal problem, not a matter of willpower. Growth hormone, HGH, is produced in the anterior pituitary gland located at the base of the brain. The major role is to stimulate liver and other tissues to secrete insulin like growth factor IGF-1. New England Journal reported in 1990 a study of 12 elderly men who had low growth hormone levels and were injected with growth hormone for 6 months. They lost 14.1% of fat tissue, gained 8.1% of lean body mass, and increased bone density. Several other studies since then have confirmed the results. It is a forbidden substance in athletes. Growth hormones have been hailed as an anti-aging drug that also combats obesity. However, the potential side effects are substantial: diabetes, hypertension, worsening of heart disease, and possibly cancer promotion, especially prostate cancer. Testosterone. Considered a male hormone, it is also present in women. Results from the European Male Aging Study found that obesity is a major cause of low testosterone levels. Low levels of testosterone are found in 75% of men of all ages with BMI greater than 40. Decreases in testosterone seen in men as they get older might be related to gradual weight gain over many years. Testosterone levels, even in older men, can become normal with weight loss. Previously, it was assumed that the decrease in testosterone levels seen in older men was due to age, but the age-related study showed that the drop in testosterone is actually due to weight gain. It is not a low testosterone level that makes people gain weight. Rather, obesity interferes with our hormone production. Excessive fat tissue secretes an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase can stimulate conversion of testosterone to estrogen in men, make breasts, or in women can convert estrogen to dihydrotestosterone, producing masculinization. Adiponectin is a recently, 1996, discovered hormone produced exclusively by our fat tissue. Levels of adiponectin are inversely related with body fat percentage in adults. The more fat we have, the less adiponectin is produced. Adiponectin has a wide range of functions. It decreases gluconeogenesis, the production of glucose from protein, improves insulin resistance, clears triglycerides, improves endothelial function, helps weight loss. Low levels of adiponectin are an independent risk factor for diabetes and the metabolic syndrome. Leptin is another hormone produced in our fat tissue. At one point, leptin was thought to be the answer to obesity. The production of leptin parallels the amount of fat we have. It regulates body weight. Leptin stimulates part of our hypothalamus that control feeding behavior, hunger, and energy expenditure. Unfortunately, high levels of insulin block the leptin effect on the brain. Obesity is frequently associated with high insulin levels. Ghrelin is a hormone produced mostly in the stomach. It is called the hunger hormone. It is elevated before a meal. Moreover, it is responsible for the growling noises in our stomach when we are hungry. After a meal, ghrelin blood levels decrease. Ghrelin is an appetite inducer and affects feeding behavior. Ghrelin levels are lower in an obese person compared to a lean person, which would suggest it does not contribute to obesity, except in the rare disease called Prader-Willi syndrome. These patients produce excessive amounts of ghrelin and therefore get hungrier and eat more. PYY, a hormone peptide, YY. PYY is produced in the small intestine. When food reaches the stomach, ghrelin production lowers, and we are no longer hungry. The food must reach the small intestines, which will take at least 15 minutes before PPY is produced that signals satiety. Chapter 18. Bariatric Surgery. Over the last 3 years, we have seen 105 patients who underwent gastric surgery. 45 patients had lap band surgery and 60 had gastric bypass or gastric sleeve surgery. After surgery, most initially lost weight, but then gained most or all of their weight back. The approximate cost of a lap band surgery is around $15,000 and for gastric bypass, $35,000. The cost for 35 patients with lap band surgery was $675,000 and the cost of gastric bypass and gastric sleeve for 60 patients was $2.1 million. None of those 105 patients had long-term benefits. Some had significant complications. In my opinion, mutilation of the stomach is not the answer. Most insurance companies will pay for the Diet of Hope program. Some insurance companies now insist the patients should first learn how to eat right and send the patients to us. Most patients who have made up their mind to have surgery have zero motivations to follow a diet. They want an easy cure for their problem. During the year 2009, over 220,000 patients underwent bariatric surgery according to the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. Lap band, an inflatable silicone ring, is wrapped around the upper stomach, reducing the effective stomach to the size of a golf ball. Based on a Belgian study of 82 patients, half of the bands had to be removed after 12 years of follow-up. The advantage of the surgery is its reversibility. The disadvantage is its high reoperation rate and lack of effectiveness. There has been a significant decrease of this surgery over the last few years. Gastric sleeve is probably the most performed gastric surgery today. More than half of the stomach is permanently removed. The immediate results are fair, especially in morbidly obese and diabetic patients. Continuous overeating can stretch the remaining stomach and reduces the benefit of surgery. No reliable long-term studies are available. A recent independent review of the long-term success rate of patients undergoing lap band surgery showed that only 20% of patients maintained their initial weight loss after 2 years. For gastric bypass, it was 45%. Why do people consent to these drastic surgical interventions? There is this widely held belief that changing eating habits and diets are rarely effective over a long period of time. For some very obese or diabetic patients, they believe surgery is the only option. Our Diet of Hope program can easily match and even surpass the weight loss results of surgery. Over 100 patients have lost more than 100 pounds. 5 patients have lost more than 150 pounds. Our star patient, Linda, has lost 240 pounds. More than 800 patients have lost more than 50 pounds. It takes months and years to lose this amount of weight. The success is long-term. Why are we successful? We have given up on the low-fat diet even if our medical societies still support it. In our opinion, a high carbohydrate diet is the cause of an epidemic of obesity and diabetes. It is time that the Heart Association and Diabetic Association admit their mistake in recommending the evil high-carbohydrate food pyramid as the proper diet for the whole nation. Weight loss medications. 5 medications have been approved for long-term use. Belvic, Qsima, Contrave, Orlistat, Saxenda. All 5 medications carry the advice to use the medication in adjunct with a low-calorie diet and increased physical activity. Orlistat, Xenical. Of the 5 medications, this has been around the longest. The main side effect is oily diarrhea or oily leakage from the anus. It blocks fat absorption. Fat-soluble vitamins such as A, D, E, and K need to be supplemented. Monthly costs are approximately $492. Basically, it's an expensive and unpleasant medication. Belvic, lorcaserin, suppresses appetite and increases feeling of fullness. Main side effects are headaches, nausea, dry mouth, dizziness, fatigue, and constipation. It can raise pulse and blood pressure, may be habit-forming, and is only modestly effective and lowers weight in a year by 4 to 5%. Cash price for 60 pills is $240. Qsima, a combination of phentermine, an appetite suppressant, and topiramate, an anti-seizure medication. Side effects are insomnia, dry mouth, dizziness, constipation, change in sense of taste and smell. It can cause birth defects. Weight loss amounts to 5% in 1 year. Monthly costs are $224. Contrave. It consists of 2 old medications. Bupropion is approved to treat depression and to aid smoking cessation. Naltrexone is approved to treat alcohol and opioid addiction. The 2 medications combined somehow reduce appetite. Only 53% of patients in the original studies could continue for 1 year because of side effects. Side effects were mostly nausea, headaches, vomiting, insomnia, dizziness, constipation, and diarrhea. An increase in blood pressure and pulse was common. In the initial studies, the effective weight loss was 4.6%. Patients who cannot lose more than 5% of body weight in the first 3 months on this medication are recommended to discontinue the medication. Monthly costs are about $220. Saxenda. It is not a new medication. The other name is Victoza, a medication used for diabetes. The medication must be injected. It slows stomach emptying and creates a feeling of fullness. The medication is approved to treat obesity. Side effects are nausea, vomiting, and pancreatitis. Cash price for Victoza used for diabetes is around $350 per month. Effective weight loss in 1 year is about 5%. All these new medications have one thing in common. They are not very effective and have lots of potential side effects and are very expensive. Most common weight loss is between 4% and 5% of body weight in 1 year. You can lose 10 pounds in a year if your weight is 200 pounds. You spend $2,000 a year for the medication, and for each pound you lose, you spend $200. How is the pharmaceutical industry able to sell this product to the medical community? Patients following the diet of hope for just 6 weeks can easily lose 5 to 10% of their body weight. There are no side effects of losing weight by healthy eating. Chapter 19. Exercise and Obesity. For the obese patient, exercise to lose weight is wishful thinking. Do the math. Light exercise, such as walking and gardening, burns an average of 4 calories per minute, 240 calories per hour. Moderate exercise, such as brisk walking, tennis, and modest hiking, burns 6 calories per minute, 360 calories per hour. Heavy exercise, such as jogging, vigorous hiking, racquetball, and cross-country skiing, burn an average 10 calories per minute, 600 calories per hour. 1 pound of body fat contains 3,500 calories. On average, to lose 1 pound of fat, a person must exercise 1 hour per day for 10 days and not increase the amount of food they consume. So, after exercising for 10 days, a person weighing 300 pounds will weigh 299 pounds. How discouraging! However, this same person can accomplish the same weight loss by not eating a bagel for breakfast. Portion control and avoiding fattening carbohydrates should be the initial treatment for obesity. This approach is far more effective. With the diet of hope, this person can expect to lose 20 to 30 pounds in 6 weeks. Extremely obese patients generally cannot or do not exercise. They simply do not have the energy. Their bodies are in a fat storing mode. Their insulin levels are high and they have no access to their stored fat. Therefore, they lack energy. Once their metabolism switches to a fat-consuming mode, they feel more energetic and feel like exercising. Exercise is far more helpful in maintaining weight. We can have the bagel after an hour of exercise. Though we won't lose weight, we will maintain our weight. We all know we can work up an appetite with exercise. The food industry knows this too. For this reason, it is not uncommon to find food places next to a gym, ready to reward us for our efforts. The more muscle we have, the more calories we burn. When we measure the basal metabolism of our obese patient who carry an extra 100 pounds and therefore have more muscle, their metabolism is usually slightly above normal. Oftentimes, these patients are surprised because they assume they were suffering from slow metabolism. Increasing muscles through weightlifting stimulates our metabolism. However, the effects are small. If we replace 5 pounds of fat with 5 pounds of muscle through weightlifting, our metabolism increases only by 24 calories a day, the calories of 4 potato chips. If we weigh ourselves before we go to bed and again early in the morning, we will discover that most weight loss occurs at night while we are asleep. The better and deeper the sleep, the more weight loss occurs. It is thought during a good sleep, the body releases growth hormone. Growth hormone stimulates cell regeneration and growth and helps build muscle mass. This activity stimulates the metabolism. Good sleep lowers cortisol levels. High cortisol levels lead to a lower metabolism. Lack of sleep lowers leptin and increases ghrelin, which results in an increase of appetite. Leptin is a hormone released by our fat cells. Leptin sends a safety signal to the brain. Ghrelin produced by the stomach stimulates hunger. Lower leptin levels signal to the brain that we need more energy. We have to eat. High ghrelin levels make us hungry. A good night's sleep is important for us. Sleep deprivation can cause weight gain. The health club industry has over 10,000 clubs in the US with over 50 million members, with an annual income of over $20 billion. This industry has grown dramatically over the last 40 years. Some cynics say the growth of health clubs has paralleled the epidemic of obesity. Again, exercise alone for the treatment of obesity, in my opinion, is not very effective. However, exercise is helpful for weight maintenance. My wife and I are strong believers in exercise. We have sponsored a 10K race, Cinco de Mayo race in Tucson, for the last 22 years. We play tennis, we run, we hike, and we enjoy bicycle tours. During our honeymoon, we climbed Kilimanjaro in Africa. Exercise improves your overall health. Daily exercise should be part of a healthy living. Benefits of exercise. 1. Improves chances to live longer and healthier. 2. Protects against developing heart disease, lowers blood pressure and cholesterol. 3. Helps prevent adult onset of diabetes. 4. Helps prevent arthritis. 5. Helps prevent osteoporosis. 6. Reduces the risk of falling in older patients. 7. Relieves symptoms of depression and anxiety. 8. Helps to maintain healthy weight. 9. Helps keep you agile. 10. And many other benefits. Chapter 20. The Law of Thermodynamics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, but can only change from one form to another. Those who consume more calories than they expend in energy will gain weight. While this law is correct, it does not explain what makes us eat more and why our bodies like to store fat. We can accuse our poor patients of eating excessively or not exercising enough. While this is true, it offers little explanation. We need to ask the following questions. What does the body do with the food we eat? How do we digest certain foods? What is the hormonal response to food? What causes fat storage? How does our brain respond to different food? We can come up with many excuses for our patients. We live in a toxic food environment. Too many fast food restaurants tempt us with ever-increasing proportions. We don't cook anymore. We don't exercise enough. We are under the influence of the clever food industry. Our government and the medical societies are of no help. We don't eat enough protein or fat, and we eat too many carbohydrates. Why does our body love carbohydrates? Why do we store carbohydrates as fat? Here is where our hormones play an important role. The master hormone is insulin. Its main task is to keep our sugar level as close to normal as possible. The carbohydrates we eat end up as sugar in our bloodstream. Insulin takes care of the glucose, and fructose goes directly to the liver. Glucose can be stored as glycogen in our muscles and liver. The storage amount is limited. Excessive sugar gets stored as fat. So, insulin is a storage hormone. It is the controller of our fat tissue. If insulin levels are elevated, no fat can be released. Therefore, carbohydrates we eat enter a one-way street to our fat tissue. If insulin levels are elevated, the body has no access to the food recently consumed. For this reason, we may feel tired 2 to 3 hours after we eat. It's as if we are out of gasoline and need to eat again. While this is a simplified explanation, it effectively explains our behavior. Clearly, fat doesn't make us overweight. It is the carbohydrates we consume that make us fat. For example, feedlots for cows use sweet corn to fatten their animals. So, if we want to encourage our body to change from a fat storage mode to a fat consuming mode, we need to reduce our insulin levels. We have learned that excessive fructose consumption can lead to liver insulin resistance, raising our insulin levels. What is more, after excessive prolonged glucose consumption, our muscles become insulin resistant. Again, more insulin is needed to produce glucose. Unfortunately, fat tissue rarely becomes insulin resistant. Insulin resistance has several consequences. Higher insulin levels maintain the body in the fat storage mode. Moreover, higher insulin levels stimulate cholesterol production in the liver. Insulin also affects the kidney by stimulating salt and water retention, which can increase blood pressure. Lastly, higher insulin levels are known to stimulate cancer growth. Chapter 21. Carbohydrates, saccharides, or sugars. Carbohydrates are one of the 3 macronutrients, along with proteins and fats. Carbohydrates supply energies, calories. The human body can function without carbohydrates. Humans can obtain 100% of their energy requirements from protein and fat. The 2010 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, USDA, call for moderate to high carbohydrate consumption. The guidelines suggest that a so-called balanced diet should include 6 1-ounce servings of a grain food each day. It is suggested that at least half of these servings derive from whole grain sources and the rest from enriched refined grains. Types of carbohydrates. Monosaccharides, sugars that can contain one molecule. Glucose, fructose, galactose. Disaccharides, 2 sugar molecules are combined. Sucrose, or table sugar, is formed of glucose and fructose. Sucrose is synthesized only by plants. High fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose and 45% glucose made from corn. Lactose, or milk sugar, is a combination of galactose and glucose. Maltose consists of 2 units of glucose in beer. Polysaccharides, multiple sugar molecules are combined. Glycogen is a storage form of glucose in muscle and liver. Every gram of glycogen is stored with 3 grams of water. We can store a total of 1,200 calories as glycogen in our muscles and liver. Cellulose is the major form of fiber in our diet from vegetables, fruits, and nuts. Starches, such as bread, rice, and potatoes, contain only glucose, no fructose. Sucrose, table sugar. The only sugar available 150 years ago was sugar derived from sugarcane, originally introduced from Asia. This sugar was relatively expensive. My great-grandmother kept sugar cubes in a silver box. Then, sugar beet became available around 1870. It was relatively cheap, and that's when sugar consumption started to rise. In 1960, the average sugar consumption was 120 pounds per person per year. Then, in 1970, high fructose corn syrup was introduced. It was the cheapest sugar because the subsidies of our government granted to the corn industry. Now, the average sugar consumption is at least 150 pounds per person per year. The government pays $20 billion a year to subsidize corn and soy production. Why is sugar toxic? In his book, Fat Chance, Dr. Robert Lustig argues that sugar is toxic to the body. The human body has never been exposed to excessive amounts of sugar before. The average adult person carries 5 liters of blood. Those 5 liters contain 1 tablespoon of glucose, reflecting a normal blood sugar level of 65 to 99 milligrams, or roughly 4 to 5 grams of glucose. A 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola has 39 grams of sugar, or at least 8 teaspoons of sugar. Insulin is a hormone that defends us against fluctuations of blood sugar. Insulin opens channels that allow glucose to enter muscles, liver, and other organ systems. Insulin converts excessive sugar to fat and stores it in our fat tissue. To measure the challenge to the insulin system, we use an index called glycemic index. It measures the 2-hour blood sugar response to a given load of 50 grams of a food. Glucose is the standard and has a glycemic index of 100. Unfortunately, there is an alternative method that uses white bread as the standard index of 100. The more refined the food is, the quicker and higher the sugar rises. In the original system, the glycemic index of white bread was 69 and whole wheat bread was 72, while table sugar, sucrose, was 59. Table sugar consists of glucose and fructose. Fructose has a glycemic index of 22. Other examples of glycemic index are baked potato, 98, instant rice, 91, and cornflake cereal, 80. Fat and protein have a glycemic index of 0. Source: Wheat Belly. A continuous bombardment of our body with high glycemic food, especially glucose, stresses the insulin capability. Muscles and liver cannot cope with the massive influx of glucose and become insulin resistant. This is the very early stage of metabolic syndrome and can lead to diabetes. However, our fat tissue is the last to become insulin resistant. Fat accumulation continues on a high carbohydrate diet. Fructose. Sucrose is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. High fructose corn syrup is 45% glucose and 55% fructose. Not much of a difference. fructose consumption has increased fivefold over the last century. 25% of calories we consume come from sugars. Fruits are now available all year long. In the past, they were only available during harvest time. Most fruits are hybrids designed to be very sweet. Sweetness is related to fructose. Fructose is much sweeter than glucose. Fructose does not stimulate insulin release and raises blood sugar levels very little. In the past, the Diabetic Association felt that fructose would be ideal for diabetics, but fructose might be worse than glucose. Fructose moves from the gut directly to the liver. The liver is the primary site for fructose metabolism. The liver has only a limited capacity to process fructose. Fructose cannot be converted into glycogen, the storage form of glucose. Fructose metabolism requires energy. If the energy is exhausted, then fructose can be changed to uric acid, which can cause gout. Most of the fructose reaching the liver is converted to fat, causing a fatty liver, which can eventually progress to liver cirrhosis. Non-alcoholic fatty liver cirrhosis is now the third most common cause for the need of liver transplants. Latinos have a high incidence of diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver. 19% of Latinos have a genetic defect that makes them highly sensitive to fructose. Prolonged excessive fructose consumption causes liver insulin resistance, which leads to hyperinsulinemia. Hyperinsulinemia frequently leads to excess body fat storage. High insulin levels promote cancer growth. Fructose does not produce satiety. Rather, it stimulates the reward centers in our brain that tempt us to eat more of the same. The capacity of the liver to metabolize fructose is thought to be 50 grams per day. A recent study in the Journal of American Medical Association found that high sugar consumption doubles the chance of dying from heart disease. Chapter 22. Ketones. What are ketones? Fat is stored in our fat cells as triglycerides. 3 fatty acids are connected to glycerol molecule. When the triglycerides leave a fat cell, they are broken down in fatty acids and glycerol. Glycerol can be converted to sugar. Our liver can split fatty acids into ketones. 3 ketones are created. Acetoacetic acid can cross the blood-brain barrier and provide the brain and rest of our body with energy. Acetone can be eliminated by the kidneys and lungs, helping us to lose calories. Ketosis is a metabolic state in our body where the body switches from pure sugar energy processing mode to utilizing fat as the main energy provider. All of us change to that mode if we don't eat for 12 hours. The body depletes the sugar reserves, which are limited, and turns to fat as energy source. The maximum storage capacity for carbohydrates is 1,200 to 1,500 calories derived from glycogen in muscles and liver. A marathon runner will hit the wall at 20 miles of running. His body is out of glycogen and must switch to fatty acids and ketones. Certainly, most of us have fat energy supplies that can last for weeks or longer. Fasting, prolonged exercise, low carbohydrate diets produce a mild state of ketosis. Benign ketosis should not be confused with diabetic ketoacidosis, a severe complication in diabetics who can no longer process glucose due to lack of insulin. If we want to lose weight and get rid of our excessive fat stores, then we need to mobilize our fat. Fat must leave the fat cells, has to travel to our liver, and our liver changes fatty acids into ketones. Ketones are the markers that tell us our body has switched from sugar to fat as its preferred energy provider. So, ketones in our blood are desirable. We get frustrated if one of our successful patients consults a diabetic dietitian and is told they must eat at least 50 grams of carbohydrates with each meal. This recommendation dates to a study 40 years ago where the sugar consumption of the brain was measured. This study showed that our brain uses 120 grams to 140 grams of sugar over a period of 24 hours. However, what the study missed is that if sugar is the only energy provider available, the brain will use it exclusively. If ketones are available, our brain will use ketones too. A ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate diet, was developed for children with seizures who were unresponsive to medications. Ketones calmed the brain and seizures cleared. Such evidence suggests that ketones are beneficial for the brain. Some cells in our body, including parts of our brain, can use only glucose. Our liver is perfectly capable of creating glucose from protein. Most diabetics are aware of sugar production by the liver. They go to bed with a normal blood sugar, eat nothing all night, but the blood sugar is elevated in the morning. Their liver created glucose from protein. We use metformin to block the liver from making glucose from protein. Recommending that a diabetic eat sugar is condemning them to a state of permanent diabetes and all its complications. Chapter 23. Addiction. The Webster's Dictionary definition of addiction is a strong, harmful need to regulate and have something or do something, a compulsive psychological need for a use of a habit-forming substance, characterized by the tolerance and by well-defined psychological symptoms upon withdrawal. Can food be addictive? The answer is definitely yes. One of the Diet of Hope patients, a recovered heroin addict, came back after the first week on the program and told us when he stopped eating sugar and refined carbohydrates, he became nauseated, developed diarrhea, and started to sweat. For him, the withdrawal from a carbohydrate was almost as bad as the withdrawal from heroin. Several years ago, I was at a medical meeting. Next door, the food industry also had a meeting. I was curious and listened to one presentation. A new food was created with a mix of fat, sugar, and salt. It was crunchy. It was tested on 10 volunteers with a functional MRI. The test showed that a small area in the midbrain was activated, which is considered a pleasure center. The experts expected that this food will sell very well. This is an example of how the food industry manipulates us. A new weight loss medication, rimonabant, first came on the market in Europe. It was very effective in producing weight loss. However, it was withdrawn from the market when some patients became suicidal. It blocked the pleasure center too effectively. The pleasure center is called nucleus accumbens, a structure in the basal forebrain. It is the key structure of the brain responsible for reward, motivation, and addiction. Sugar and carbohydrates stimulate this center through the neurotransmitter dopamine, the same way as active drugs do. Sugar and carbohydrates stimulate the center through the neurotransmitter dopamine the same way as addictive drugs do. Fat does not stimulate the nucleus accumbens, however some proteins do. One is gluten, the main protein in wheat. During digestion of gluten, polypeptides are released that can penetrate the blood-brain barrier and create an opium-like effect on the brain. This stimulates our pleasure center, which could be a possible cause of food addiction. The action of these polypeptides can be prevented with opiate-blocking drugs naloxone and naltrexone. Diet of Hope food addiction screening. Yes or no? 1. Have you ever tried to cut back on your consumption of carbohydrates? 2. Have you ever felt guilty about eating carbohydrates or sugary food? 3. Do you sometimes eat though you're not hungry? 4. Do you find yourself searching for sugar or a starch fix? 5. Do you experience withdrawal symptoms such as headaches, mood swings, irritability, or trouble sleeping when you limit your carbohydrates? 6. Does a meal with only meat and vegetables leave you unsatisfied? 7. After a large meal, do you feel sluggish, tired, and foggy? 8. Do you feel you could not live without your favorite carbohydrate foods? 9. Do you feel you need a bread serving with lunch and dinner? 10. Do you feel you have to start your day eating carbohydrates? Scoring. Add the yes answers to determine your addiction level. 0 to 2, you are not dependent on carbohydrates. 3 to 4, your score is in a range of mild carbohydrate addiction. 5 to 7, your score indicates a moderate addiction to carbohydrates. 8 to 10, you scored in a severe carbohydrate addiction range. Chapter 24. Fats. There are 3 naturally occurring fats: monosaturated fats, polysaturated fats, and saturated fats. Trans fat is a fat artificially created by the food industry. Trans fats are created when hydrogen is added to vegetable oil to make it more solid. Procter & Gamble took advantage of this cheaper alternative to animal fat and created Crisco vegetable shortening. Crisco and similar fats were thought to be healthier than saturated fats. About 50 years ago, saturated fats were thought to be the main culprit causing heart disease. Trans fats were promoted as a heart-healthy alternative to saturated fat by our medical societies. Now, it turns out they are far worse than butter or lard. Trans fats raise the bad cholesterol, LDL, and lower the good cholesterol, HDL. During a recent meeting on metabolism, Professor Rasmussen, a leading nutrition expert from Europe, was wondering how many people die due to this faulty recommendation. Trans fats are found in fried and battered food, microwave popcorn, frozen desserts, frozen pizzas, cookies, and pie crusts. According to the Grocery Manufacturers Association, trans fats in food production have been reduced by 73% over the last 10 years. But this reduction is not enough. It is estimated by the FDA that eliminating all trans fats from our food supply could prevent 22,000 heart attacks per year. Just imagine how many heart attacks occurred before trans fats were reduced by 73%. The diet of hope is trans fat free. Saturated fat. Saturated fats were singled out as an important culprit in raising bad cholesterol, LDL, but later studies showed that they also raised good cholesterols, HDL, so the ratio between good and bad cholesterol remains the same. Also, there is a problem with the definition of saturated fat because most fats contain several different types. For example, 47% of lard is monosaturated fat resembling olive oil, which is considered a healthy fat. 12% is polyunsaturated fat like vegetable oil. Only 41% of lard is saturated fat and 30% of the 40% is stearic acid that is found in chocolate and is considered a good fat. In sum, 70% of the fat in lard will improve our cholesterol profile and 30% raise the good and the bad cholesterol equally. So, why is lard called a saturated fat? Butter is 60% saturated, 26% monosaturated, and 5% polyunsaturated, and smaller amounts of other fats. Even olive oil contains 13% saturated fat. Coconut oil and palm oil have also been singled out as being damaging to the heart because they are saturated fats. They have a 12-carbon chain compared to the 18-carbon chain of most saturated fats. Populations who consume large amounts of these oils are healthy and with little heart disease. Monosaturated fats. Olives and olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil, and most nuts such as walnuts, almonds, cashews, and macadamia nuts are monosaturated fats. Canola oil stands for Canadian Oil Low Acid. Canola oil comes from rapeseed. Monosaturated fats lower the bad cholesterol LDL and raise the good cholesterol HDL. These fats are considered healthy. Olive oil is the most commonly used fat in Mediterranean countries. The island of Crete, studied by Ansel Keys in the 7-country study, had the lowest rate of heart disease and the highest average lifespan. They had a higher consumption of fat than most other countries. 37% of their calories came from fat, mostly from olive oil, cheese, fish, meat, and milk from grass-fed animals and eggs from free-range chickens. The Lionheart study compared the American low-fat diet with the French diet that was higher in fat and included some red wine. 600 patients with a heart attack were equally divided between the diets. The study was stopped when the patients on the low-fat American diet had a 70% higher incidence of death from all causes. Both studies suggested that consuming a low-fat diet, which automatically is a high-carbohydrate diet, is not healthy. Eating fats, especially the right fats, is important. The diet of hope promotes the consumption of good fats. Polysaturated fats. The most important polysaturated fats are omega-3 and omega-6 fats. Those are fats that our body cannot produce. Those are called essential fatty acids. Omega-6 and omega-3 should be in balance, ideally in a 1-to-1 ratio. A more realistic ratio is 3-to-1. Soybean oil has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of 10-to-1. Corn oil, a ratio of 100-to-1. We suggest avoiding corn, sunflower, cottonseed, grapeseed, soybean, and peanut oils. High omega-6 amounts are also in meats from animals fed corn and soy, cows, and pigs especially. Meat from grass-fed animals has a good ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. The American Heart Association has recently increased its dietary recommendations of omega-3 to 3 portions of fatty fish per week or 1 gram of omega-3 daily. Salmon, sardines, tuna, and herring are excellent sources of omega-3. In addition, there are now supplements available containing omega-3 extracted from grass and algae for vegetarians. Before 1900s, the production and dietary use of fats and oils derived from vegetable seeds was essentially zero. Not everybody believes they are healthy. Multiple steps are used in processing of seeds: cooking, mechanical pressing, solvent extraction, degumming, refining, bleaching, deodorizing. Fully processed oils are devoid of all nutrients present in the seeds. Processed oils are the equivalent of refined white sugar and can be called white oils. Like sugar, they are nutrient deficient, provide mostly calories, but unlike sugar, may also contain toxins. For more information on this topic, we recommend Udo Erasmus's book, Fats That Heal and Fats That Kill. The people on the island of Crete consumed more fat than Americans did in 1960, yet they had little heart disease. A major difference between Cretan and American diets lies in the consumption of sugar. In 1960, the average yearly consumption of sugar in Crete was 10 pounds, mostly from honey. The average consumption of sugar in the US was 120 pounds. Chapter 25. History of the Low-Fat Diet. After World War II, a significant increase in heart disease occurred. Heart attacks frequently affected middle-aged men without warning. Congressmen and senators were not spared. In 1930, the incidence of yearly heart attacks was 30,000, and in 1960 it was 500,000. President Eisenhower had a heart attack in 1955. Dr. Paul Dudley White became his cardiologist. Dr. Dudley noted that before 1930 he rarely, if ever, saw a heart attack patient. But after the war, it appeared an epidemic of heart disease was occurring. The medical community was searching for answers. Some of the epidemic was related to increased longevity. People didn't die from infectious diseases anymore since the discovery of antibiotics. But this still did not fully explain the epidemic. Several scientific studies from the 1940s have revealed a correlation between very high levels of cholesterol and coronary heart disease. Cholesterol became the suspect. After the war, Ansel Keys, a scientist from the University of Minnesota, received a yearly $100,000 grant to study diets in different countries. Some early research data suggests that a high intake of fat may raise cholesterol levels. Keys had access to nutrition patterns of 22 countries. He picked only 7 countries where he could demonstrate a correlation between saturated fat consumption and high cholesterol levels, which presumably increased the risk of heart attacks. In the other 15 countries, he could not show that correlation. He had to exclude countries like France, Holland, and Switzerland. A study like this would not be given any scientific merit today. Also, in those days, only total cholesterol could be measured. The concept of good and bad cholesterol was not available yet. Later studies showed that saturated fat raises the good and the bad cholesterol and therefore does not increase the risk of heart disease. Keys recruited many followers to his hypothesis, especially scientists from the nutrition department of the East Coast universities such as Harvard and Yale, which became believers of this concept. Saturated fat and cholesterol were frequently lumped together because food with high saturated fat generally also had high cholesterol levels. However, Keys' own study showed no correlation between cholesterol intake and cholesterol blood levels. His statement in 1977, "We have known all along that cholesterol in diets does not matter at all except in rabbits. Rabbit cholesterol blood levels can raise 3,000-fold with feeding of cholesterol. Human serum cholesterol levels are essentially independent of the cholesterol intake with the whole range of human diets." Despite his statements, dietary cholesterol was singled out as the main culprit in producing heart disease. All food containing cholesterol, such as eggs, butter, shrimp, and milk, were essentially treated as poison. Margarine, trans fat, which was the real poison, replaced butter. Polysaturated fats, such as vegetable oils, were recommended initially, but later were found to possibly aggravate or produce cancer. The diet heart hypothesis became the gospel, then a religion, and later a dogma. The medical profession became totally convinced that fat and cholesterol intake was a major risk factor for heart disease and cancer. The hypothesis claimed there was a direct correlation between heart disease and the consumption of saturated fat and cholesterol. In 1997, the U.S. Senate Selected Committee of Nutrition and Human Needs, chaired by George McGovern, put the diet-heart hypothesis on the national agenda with publication on the dietary goals of the United States. McGovern stated that too much fat, too much sugar, or too much salt can be and are directly linked to heart disease, cancer, obesity, and stroke. The sugar industry made sure fat was singled out as the main culprit. The Lipid Research Council study, LRC, showed that a drug, cholestyramine, lowered cholesterol and reduced the incidence of heart disease. This was enough evidence for the lead researcher to proclaim that lowering cholesterol with diets will reduce heart disease the same way. So, the assumption was that if lowering cholesterol with medication lowered the risk of heart disease, then lowering cholesterol with diet would render the same result. Unfortunately, manipulations of diets are far more complicated than taking a pill. No study with diets was done. However, it became a belief system. No serious scientific diet study ever conducted proved the diet-heart hypothesis. However, studies contradicting the diet-heart hypothesis appeared. The most prominent was the Lionheart study. 600 patients who had experienced a heart attack were equally divided to follow the American Heart Association diet or a French Mediterranean diet. The study had to be stopped early. There was a 70% higher mortality rate in the group using the American Heart Association diet. A $1 billion study, the Women's Health Initiative study, was supposed to settle the question about low-fat diets, the importance of fiber, exercise, and hormone replacement for women. 49,000 women were enrolled. 23,000 women were chosen to go on low-fat diet, a diet high in fiber. They were encouraged to exercise and receive frequent counseling. The control group was left to their own devices. The expected result was that the intensively treated group would have a significantly lower rate of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and obesity. Surprisingly, there was no significant difference between both groups at the end of the 8-year study. If we lower one major food group in our diet, such as fat, we need to increase consumption of another food group such as carbohydrates because protein intake cannot be raised significantly. It was suggested that all we need to eat was more carbohydrates. The American Heart Association certified hundreds of carbohydrates, all processed food, as heart healthy. Then along came the food pyramid, which I refer to as the evil food pyramid. The evil food pyramid recommended that everyone eat at least 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, cereals, and rice daily. In my opinion, there is a direct relationship between these recommendations and the epidemic of obesity and diabetes in our country. Arguments against the low-fat diet. The average American diet is composed of 50% to 60% carbohydrates, 15 to 30% protein, and 30 to 40% fat. If we remove fat from our food, we essentially increase the amount of carbohydrates and proteins remain the same. A low-fat diet is a high-carbohydrate diet. Carbohydrates are not essential for a body. See the chapter on Eskimos. Risks associated with a low-fat diet. 1. It raises triglycerides and increases risk for heart disease. 2. It lowers the good cholesterol, HDL, and increased risk for heart disease. 3. It changes the bad cholesterol, LDL, to the small dense form and increased risk for heart disease. 4. All our carbohydrates end up as sugar in our bloodstream. Control of sugar requires insulin. Insulin changes excessive sugar to triglycerides, fat, and stores it in our belly. 5. Chronically elevated insulin levels create insulin resistance, which is the precursor for diabetes. Studies on longevity show that the only thing centenarians have in common are low insulin levels. Typically, you become a type 2 diabetic if you eat simple carbohydrates. 6. Lipoprotein A is an independent risk factor for heart disease. Excessive carbohydrate consumption increases lipoprotein. Only a low carbohydrate diet will lower it. Statins do not affect lipoprotein. 7. Studies have shown that a high intake of carbohydrates and sweetened beverages is associated with an increased risk of breast cancer. Eskimos had no breast cancer on their original diet. They did not consume any simple carbohydrates. 8. Only animal food contains vitamin B12. Vegetarians need to supplement vitamin B12. 9. Fat is needed to absorb vitamin A, D, E, and K. 10. Gallbladders contract and send bile to the small intestines in response to a fatty meal. Low-fat diets increase the risk of gallstones because the bile stagnates and becomes too concentrated. Chapter 26. The Rehabilitation of Saturated Fat. Over 50 years ago, the whole nation started a food experiment. Ancel Keys, a leading scientist from the University of Minnesota and an influential member of the American Heart Association, created a hypothesis. People with very high cholesterol numbers, over 300 milligrams, had higher frequency of heart attacks than people with lower cholesterol numbers. He received large money grants to study nutrition in multiple countries in the world. He found out that populations with high saturated fat consumption had a higher cholesterol level. His conclusion was that if eating saturated fat raises cholesterol numbers and high cholesterol numbers increase the risk of heart disease, it makes sense to avoid saturated fat to reduce the incidence of heart disease. The diet-heart hypothesis. There were major problems with his data. Basically, he cheated. He had access to data from 22 countries but only used 7 countries where he could show some sort of correlation with eating saturated fat and higher levels of heart disease. For example, he had to exclude France. French are known to enjoy fatty foods. Yes, they have significantly higher levels of cholesterol than we do, but surprisingly had less than half the incidence of heart attacks compared to the US, the French paradox. Actually, most countries showed no correlation between cholesterol levels and heart disease. Ignorance of other cultures led to another wrong assumption. He studied the island of Crete during Lent. Eating animal products during Lent, except for seafood, is not allowed. Ancel Keys' impression was that the people of Crete ate very little saturated fat, and that was the reason they lived long and healthy lives. He also forgot to mention that the yearly sugar consumption on the island was 10 pounds per year compared to 122 pounds in the US. Only the total cholesterol could be measured during those days. Later data showed that eating saturated fat raises both HDL and LDL. So balance between good and bad cholesterol is unchanged. Billions of dollars have been spent to prove Ancel Keys' hypothesis. To this day, no study exists to prove the hypothesis that eating saturated fat raises cholesterol and therefore causes heart attacks. This unproven fear of fat led to the creation of the food pyramid, fully supported by the Heart Association and Diabetes Association. How can you tell a diabetic to eat more sugar? Multiple large-scale studies over the last few years showed no evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with heart disease. A recent critical review was published in the journal Nutrition. So, don't feel guilty to eat the fat of the land. Replacing lard with hydrogenated fat by our fast food industry was a big mistake. Recent studies have uncovered that the sugar industry realized that high sugar consumption can cause heart disease. They bribed the 3 leading nutritionists from Harvard University to rearrange the published data on food so it would appear that saturated fat and not sugar was the culprit causing heart disease. Those were the experts advising our government on nutrition. They bought Ancel Keys, the leading expert of the Heart Association, by providing generous grant money for his nutrition studies, basically making him an employee. Chapter 27. Cigarettes, the missing link. It is tempting to speculate that a high-fat diet was never the culprit of the epidemic of heart disease at the end of World War II. During the war, high-fat diets were not available for most populations in the world. So why was high-fat consumption blamed for the epidemic of heart disease after the war? Cigarettes were one of the few pleasures that American GIs could enjoy regardless of where they were. There was nothing more relaxing than a cigarette during moments of rest before returning to the battle. In 1941, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt made tobacco a protected crop. Cigarettes were included in the daily food rations for GIs. Tobacco companies sent millions of free cigarettes to the troops. The U.S. Army set up a series of camps in France, each named after a popular American cigarette such as Lucky Strike, Chesterfield, and Old Gold. Essentially, the government hooked everybody on cigarettes. It was estimated that in 1949, 90% of the adult male population smoked. Even doctors were advertising that cigarettes might help patients with asthma. Starting in 1955, questions were raised that cigarette smoke may cause lung disease. In 1956, the American Heart Association issued a statement on smoking and cardiovascular disease. This statement indicated that the evidence available at the time was not sufficiently conclusive on the relationship between smoking and increased death rates from coronary heart disease. In 1957, the Surgeon General declared a link between smoking and lung cancer. In 1964, the American Medical Association accepted a $10 million grant from the tobacco industry to conduct tobacco research. The association promised not to make a statement on tobacco until the 10-year study was finished. In 1973, Arizona became the first state to pass a law restricting smoking in some public places like elevators, libraries, concert halls, and buses. In 1973, Billie Jean won the battle of the sexes in tennis against Bobby Riggs. She was promoting Virgin Slims, the cigarette for women. In 1988, the Surgeon General declared cigarettes were addictive. Cigarette consumption declined significantly in the United States. To help the cigarette industry, the U.S. government forced other countries, especially Asian countries, to open their borders to American cigarettes. Some statistics suggested that more soldiers died from cigarette smoking after the war than soldiers that actually died during the war. In 1994, heads of major tobacco companies testified before Congress that evidence of cigarette smoking causing cancer and heart disease was inconclusive. Later, evidence from their own research indicated that they knew the health risks associated to smoking. Cigarette smokers are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop coronary heart disease than non-smokers. Smoking doubles the risk of stroke. Source: Center of Disease Control. So, it took 50 years to establish a causal relationship between smoking and heart disease. The tobacco industry was very resourceful. Smoking may well have been the main reason for the epidemic of heart disease after World War II and not saturated fat and cholesterol. Chapter 28. Lies, Damn Lies, Statistics. Mark Twain. The holy grail of drug research is the double-blind placebo-controlled drug study. I participated in a physician health study that studied the effect of daily aspirin use on the increase of heart attacks. The results? Daily aspirin use reduced the incidence of heart attack by 40%. Now, it could be assumed that daily aspirin use would also reduce mortality, but it didn't. Why? We don't know, but the pharmaceutical industry suggested we should all take aspirin to prevent heart attacks, even if it may increase death from other problems. A large government-sponsored study, the Multiple Risk Factor Intervention Study, or Mr. Fit, was a $150 million study started in 1973. 12,000 high-risk males with hypertension were split into 2 groups. The special intervention group was given antihypertensive medications, diuretics, and was given intensive dietary counseling. The control group was given usual care, and they were told they were at high risk for heart disease. The control group was given usual care, and they were told they were at high risk for heart disease. The study lasted 10 years. 66% of the special intervention group were able to normalize their blood pressure. After 10 years, an equal number of patients died from both groups. The pharmaceutical industry spun the study in their favor. Mainly, the medication lowered blood pressure successfully. Therefore, patients with high blood pressure should take medications. In 1987, the famous Helsinki heart study was published. A cholesterol-lowering drug, gemfibrozil, was given to more than 4,000 patients. Cholesterol was lowered as much as 10%, and the number of heart attacks was lowered by 35%. Unfortunately, the treatment group and the control group had the same amount of deaths. This study was hailed as a triumph for medicine conquering heart disease. Little explanation was given for the fact that overall mortality did not change. An explanation for the lack of change in mortality rates was never given by any of these studies. So, why take a drug if the end result is the same? These studies show that investigators can be biased, trying to promote their ideas and neglecting important parts of the study, and they know they have the full weight of the pharmaceutical industry behind them. conflict of interest is the trouble with drug studies, which are supposed to be unbiased. Many studies are observational studies that show correlation but not causation. According to the internet, approximately 10,000 research studies are published every month. Nobody can keep up with this massive flow of information. The press picks up studies of interest. Which story sells? The press is not immune to bias. Oftentimes, what is sold as news is actually paid advertising. My pathology professor in medical school gave a lecture on observational studies. The incidence of lung cancer had steadily risen over the preceding 10 years. The number of television owners and car owners had risen the same way. This was statistically a clear correlation. But can owning a television or car be the cause of lung cancer? This is quite unlikely. Many medical studies commit this mistake to finding a correlation and thinking they have found causal relationship. For example, Dr. Burkitt, a renowned physician, studied bowel habits in people in Africa. He found that tribes that consumed a lot of fiber and had multiple bowel movements every day had no colon cancer. This was a clear correlation. His assumption was that fibers prevented colon cancer. Causation. He was influential. He wrote many papers and books convincing a lot of people that a high-fiber diet would prevent colon cancer. Now, 40 years later and after many studies, we know he was wrong. Yet, the food industry continues to market some products under that theory. The theory that a low-fat diet prevents heart disease is based on correlation and not causation. Ancel Keys, studying dietary patterns of multiple populations in the world, found a correlation in 7 countries between saturated fat consumption, elevated cholesterol, and heart disease. In 15 countries, he could not demonstrate this correlation. Today, this study would probably never be accepted. In a way, this was scientific fraud. He was convincing and wrote multiple papers with government support. In fact, the government promised to fund multi-million-dollar studies to prove his theory. The research departments of major universities were promised to be the recipients of this money. Keys' hypothesis was entirely unproven. But this was the beginning of the low-fat, heart-healthy diet religion. No studies over the last 40 years have even proven this theory. On the contrary, a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet is thought by many to be the cause of the present epidemic of obesity and diabetes. Many nutritional studies are not worth the paper they are written on. 2,000 journals are eager to accept papers and opinions. For example, after reviewing articles on coffee, I found that some of the profound research findings were based on experience with 6 or 8 patients. These kind of publications cause confusion because what is the truth today will be contradicted with a different study in the future. But even large studies from well-known universities are often only expressions of opinions. Let us look at the famous Women's Health Initiative study. 23,000 women were asked to follow a low-fat, high-fiber, and high-carbohydrate diet for 8 years. They received psychological support and were advised to exercise regularly. A control group was told not to change their eating and exercise patterns. Cost of the study? $1 billion. The researchers were convinced that the experimental group of the women would show major health benefits at the end of 8 years. Less cancers, less heart disease, less obesity, and diabetes. The result was unexpected. The treated group had no health benefits compared to the control group. We could easily argue that the experimental protocol did not work. But we should never forget the human factor. Do we really know how many women followed the protocol? It's hard to believe that anybody can stick to an experimental protocol for 8 years. They filled out multiple food questionnaires. They knew what the goal of the study was. Some did not stick to the diet but tried to please the researcher and answer the questions as expected from them. Those long-term follow-up studies can never be truly scientific. Chapter 29. Cholesterol. Good or bad? 100 years ago, we were unconcerned about cholesterol because we couldn't measure it. Ancel Keys and other scientists were given grant money by our government and the sugar industry to find out the cause of a major increase of heart disease after World War II. They used cholesterol measurement as their main tool. It was known at the time that people with a very high cholesterol level had a higher incidence of heart disease. They studied cholesterol in 22 countries and tried to correlate with the food people were eating. In some countries, there seemed to be a statistical correlation between eating saturated fat and increased levels of blood cholesterol and heart disease. Food with saturated fat usually also contains cholesterol. So then cholesterol became an easy propaganda target. Today, we know that these studies did not represent science but personal opinion of the researcher. Lack of a better explanation for the epidemic of heart disease, our government, with the persuasive help from selected scientists, decided to accuse saturated fat and cholesterol as a culprit for the epidemic. The press happily agreed to spread the message. Cholesterol became public enemy number one. Even now, just mentioning cholesterol strikes fear in the heart of uninformed people. The creation of the evil cholesterol was a great boom for the food and pharmaceutical business. They immediately jumped on the opportunity to eliminate cholesterol from our food chain and destroy blood cholesterol with new medications. Saturated fats were replaced with refined vegetable oils and margarine. What is cholesterol, and do we really need it? Cholesterol is a hard wax substance present in all the cells in our body. Cholesterol is essential for life. Our body can produce all the cholesterol that is needed. Cholesterol is needed to stabilize the membranes of our body cells. Membranes only function well if they are not too stiff and not too hard. Cholesterol is the mother substance for the production of multiple hormones. Sex hormones such as testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone are made from cholesterol. Our body makes adrenal hormones such as aldosterone and cortisone from cholesterol. Aldosterone participates in the control of our blood pressure. Cortisone promotes the synthesis of glucose to prepare our body for fight or flight in response to stress. We use cortisol to suppress inflammation. Our body makes vitamin D from cholesterol in cooperation with sunshine. The main function of vitamin D is to regulate calcium and phosphorus metabolism and has many other beneficial functions. Bile acids are derived from cholesterol. Bile acids are needed in the digestion and absorption of fat, oil, and fat-soluble vitamins such as A, D, E, and K. Bile acids emulsify fat to small fat globules. Cholesterol can be only removed from our body by conversion to bile acids and elimination through our stools. Eating a lot of fiber that combines with bile acid can lower our cholesterol. Most bile acids are reabsorbed and changed back to cholesterol. Cholesterol is secreted by glands in our skin, making the skin smooth and prevents dehydration and cracking. Cholesterol also functions as an antioxidant. Our body contains approximately 150 grams of cholesterol. 7 milligrams float in our bloodstream. Cholesterol is vitally important to our brain's function. The weight of our brain is 2% of our body weight, but 25% of cholesterol is present in our brain. Lowering cholesterol with medications may affect our brain function. In my practice of cardiology, after lowering cholesterol with statins, I have seen elderly patients develop memory problems, so-called brain fog. In a recent study, it was shown that elderly patients with high cholesterol levels had the best memory. We also know that some patients on statins develop depression. One of the most abundant substances in our brain is fatty substance called myelin. Myelin coats every nerve cell and every nerve fiber. It insulates, nourishes, and protects those structures. 20% of myelin is cholesterol. The synthesis of myelin is closely connected to the synthesis of cholesterol. Multiple sclerosis is related to damage of the myelin sheath. Our brain cells communicate with each other through synapses. Synapse production is closely related to cholesterol. The more synapses, the better our memory. Dr. Dwayne Graveline, a former NSA scientist and an astronaut, developed severe memory loss on statins. He stopped the statins, ate lots of cholesterol-containing foods, and recovered. He described his experience in a book, Lipitor, Thief of Memory, Statin Drugs and the Misguided War on Cholesterol. Only food from animal sources contain cholesterol. All plant foods are cholesterol-free. The average American adult consumes about 800 milligrams of cholesterol per day from eggs, meat, dairy, and fish and shellfish. Only about half of dietary cholesterol is absorbed. In response to cholesterol consumption, the liver decreases cholesterol production. An article in the New England Journal of Medicine from 1997 describing a 77-year-old person who consumed 25 eggs daily for at least 5 years. He had no heart disease. He had normal cholesterol levels. He had metabolic testing and was found that his liver had severely reduced cholesterol production. In addition, the absorption of the cholesterol from his gut was reduced to less than 25%. According to Udo Erasmus in his book, Fats That Heal and Fats That Kill, 70% of affluent population in the world reduce their own cholesterol production in response to cholesterol intake by a protective feedback system. Bad news? 30% of the population appeared not to have an adequate feedback system. Their cholesterol might increase with eating cholesterol-containing food. No explanation exists for this difference. In our program, The Diet of Hope, we have seen the rise of cholesterol probably in 10% of our patients despite losing significant weight in the first 6 weeks. The treatment for this problem is not clear. Frequently in those patients, cholesterol lowers again after staying on a low-carbohydrate diet for several months. Cholesterol levels in the same person can change for different reasons and are not held constant. They can change from morning to evening. They are higher in the winter and lower in the summer. Any surgical procedures raise cholesterol. A visit to the dentist raises cholesterol, and dental procedures release a significant amount of toxic materials and bacteria in our bloodstream. Why does cholesterol go up when we are stressed or when we have an infection? Cholesterol is an antioxidant and helps protect our body from multiple stresses and injuries. Arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, starts with damage to the inner lining of the arteries called endothelium. Any toxic material entering our bloodstream such as bacteria, free radicals, viruses, and others can attack the endothelium and can start an inflammatory reaction. The liver then receives this threat and sends cholesterol to control the threat. Cholesterol is sent on and carried like LDL. We'll call it the bad cholesterol because it goes up when our endothelium is stressed. It might actually be the good guy. The customary thinking makes us believe that elevated LDL levels are the cause of the endothelial damage. The Jupiter study showed that statins reduce inflammation. Lowering cholesterol might not be needed. HDL cholesterol is called the good cholesterol. It removes cholesterol from the injured and now healing site. Very high HDL cholesterol levels might be a sign of a significant repair process going on in our body and might not be a sign of good vascular health. If we have a significant supply of vitamins and antioxidants through our diet, we may be able to fight off injuries to our body without the help of cholesterol. Our cholesterol levels stay low. A high carbohydrate diet with lots of sugar does not supply enough antioxidants and creates a lot of free radicals, lowering our body's defense system. The need for cholesterol to defend against free radicals increases, and so does the cholesterol levels. Diabetic patients predominantly have smaller LDL particles, high triglycerides, low HDL, and high fibrinogen. The average total cholesterol for people with heart disease in the original Framingham study was actually 20 points lower than the healthy control. The standard tests for cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides only identify about 20% of all coronary artery disease patients according to LipoScience. The other 80% can only be identified by differentiating the particle subgroups which make up the total cholesterol figure. LDL and HDL are carrier systems. Both come in several compositions. HDL particles are divided by size and density. There are 5 different types, 2 kinds of HDL2 and 3 kinds of HDL3. HDL2 carries away the cholesterol for disposal. HDL3 particles reflect abnormally increased triglyceride content of the HDL particles. HDL3 is a weak scavenger for cholesterol. Regular LDL has small dense forms and large fluffy forms. It is felt that the small dense particles can cause damage to the vascular system. The fluffy form of LDL is benign. The Diet of Hope changes LDL from the small dense damaging form to the benign fluffy form. High lipoprotein A or LPA is often mixed together with LDL. Its presence in the blood can interfere with normal clotting dynamics and can promote clotting around atherosclerotic plaques. It also more readily oxidizes and migrates into the arterial wall than even the small dense LDL particles. 1/3 of patients with coronary artery disease have elevated LPA. Unfortunately, statin drugs do not affect LPA. LPA decreases, however, with vitamin C and the antioxidant effects from vegetables. Our program balances consumption of protein with large amounts of non-starchy vegetables and controls calories. Most patients increase their HDL cholesterol and change their LDL cholesterol from small dense form to the fluffy form. LPA improves and triglycerides markedly decline. New guidelines for the treatment of high cholesterol. Hypercholesterolemia. According to the American Heart Association and Joint National Committee (GNC), the following patients should be started on cholesterol-lowering medications, primarily statins. Healthy adults with an LDL cholesterol above 190 mg. Adults with arteriosclerotic heart disease. Adults diabetic age 40 to 75 with LDL levels above 70 mg. Adults age 40 to 75 with an LDL above 70 mg and a 10-year risk of heart attack risk above 7.25% based on age, sex, blood pressure, and smoking history. The use of fibrates and niacin are no longer recommended. LDL cholesterol should be lowered by 30 to 50% and not to the lowest possible level. The following are 2 risk calculators available to the public. www.heart.org Risk Calculator. The Heart Risk Assessment Calculator by the American Heart Association. www.cardiosmart.org, created by the College of Cardiology. Not everybody agrees with these recommendations. American Diabetes Association. No need for risk calculator. National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. Age 40 to 85 instead of 75. National Lipid Association. Risk per calculator should be above 10%. Everyone pays lip service to lifestyle change. However, very few pay attention to it. There is little belief in diet and lifestyle. The benefits are difficult to calculate and are of no interest to the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry has convinced everyone that only medications are the answer to our problems. Heart attacks were unheard of 100 years ago. What changed was what we are eating now. So, we should try to go back to what our grandparents ate. I checked the risk calculator for myself. It recommended that I should start statins at moderately high dose because of a 12.5% risk for heart attack in the next 10 years. My profile: blood pressure 120/70, cholesterol 140 mg, no diabetes, no smoking history, BMI of 22, and regular exercise. I have no risk factors for a heart attack except my age of 76. When I used age 58 with the same data, I needed no statins. Then I found out that the recommendation is for every male over 65 to be on statins regardless of risk profile, and 80% of women over age 65 should also take statins based on the risk calculator. Bottom line, the recommendation is let them all eat statins. Of course, there's also a big push to start children on statins. Lipitor now comes out in chewable form for children. A few years ago, parents of a 12-year-old boy came to me for a second opinion. The boy's doctor was recommending that he should be started on statins due to slightly elevated lipids for his age group, and his father had a heart attack at age 42. At this point, we really don't know how much damage cholesterol lowering could do on a developing brain. Starting a young child on a lifelong statin therapy, in my opinion, is irresponsible. I also strongly believe children should not start a low-fat diet. Fat is needed for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Recent studies have showed that children given breast milk have a higher IQ than children fed formulas. Breast milk is rich in omega-3 fat and lauric acid fat, a saturated fat also found in coconut oil. Are our medical associations independent and trustworthy? After reviewing the American Heart Association websites of industry advisors, you be the judge. Industry Advisory Panel for the Heart Association. National Dairy Council, the Coca-Cola Company, the Danone Company, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, General Mills, McDonald's, Nestle, Subway, Unilever, U.S. Canola Association, and many others. These companies pay multiple $1 million in different forms to be able to advise the Heart Association. There goes the independence. The result of this cooperation was the creation of the food pyramid. According to the food pyramid, we were all supposed to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, cereal, and rice daily starting at age 2. And the Heart Association was able to receive extra money for declaring some 600 food items as heart healthy. Also, the so-called heart healthy recommendations were foods created and fabricated by the food industry. No fresh food or vegetables were included. The new and improved food palette is not much better either. The American Heart Association was a powerful advocate of the low-fat diet under the leadership of Ancel Keys. A low-fat diet was touted as heart healthy. This hypothesis was never proven. It was based on manipulated science and beliefs. This hypothesis was ultimately responsible for the recommendation that a healthy diet should at least consist of 60% carbohydrates. Although totally an unproven hypothesis, all medical associations accepted the concept. In my opinion, the result of recommending a high carbohydrate diet was the cause of epidemic of obesity and diabetes. All medical associations depend on the multi-million-dollar donations of food and pharma industry. The industry is allowed to protect their interests when it comes to the creation of guidelines for the public and medical profession. Chapter 30. The Egg Story. The Great Crusade against cholesterol-rich food started 50 years ago. Eggs became public enemy number one because one egg contains 200 milligrams of cholesterol. 3 ounces of beef, pork, or chicken contain only 70 milligrams to 80 milligrams of cholesterol. Now, the food authorities are allowing us to eat eggs again, but with limits. It is recommended our daily consumption of cholesterol should not exceed 300 milligrams if we are healthy. So, 1 egg a day or less should be the limit. After researching the literature, I did not find a single study demonstrating that eating eggs causes heart disease. The Harvard Egg Study showed no ill effects amongst a group of volunteers eating 1 egg daily. In fact, this group's cholesterol numbers did not change. A government survey showed that men over 65 cut egg consumption by 46% because of the cholesterol scare. Eggs can provide the elderly with an inexpensive, nutritious food. In a study from the University of Connecticut, 42 patients 60 years or older were given 3 eggs daily for 1 month. Both the good and the bad cholesterol rose minimally. The particle size of the bad cholesterol, LDL, increased and it became fluffier, which is healthier. Then there is the 1991 study in the New England Journal. A Colorado man aged 77 was observed to have eaten 25 eggs per day for at least 5 years. Possibly 15 years. He had normal cholesterol levels and did not have heart disease. His liver had markedly reduced cholesterol production. In addition, he absorbed only 18% of the cholesterol he consumed. He doubled the conversion of cholesterol to bile acid part of it was excreted in his stool. A study done at the same time with 11 volunteers eating 5 eggs per day showed that they only absorbed 50% of the cholesterol eaten. Most nutritionists that believe in independent thinking support the concept that eating cholesterol-containing foods does not cause an elevation of blood cholesterol, nor does it cause heart disease. Elevated insulin levels related to a high refined carbohydrate diet stimulate the liver to produce cholesterol. Insulin stimulates an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase. This is the same enzyme that statin drugs block from producing cholesterol. The nutritional value of eggs. Based on 1 large egg. 75 calories, 6.5 milligrams of protein, 5 milligrams of fat. Carbohydrates, 0. Protein. The egg's protein contains all the essential amino acids and is easy to digest. Fat. 47% of an egg's fat is monosaturated, like olive oil. 23% is polysaturated, omega-3 and omega-6. Eggs from free-range chickens have a higher omega-3 level. Vitamins. Eggs contain all vitamins except vitamin C. Eggs are an especially good source for vitamin B12, B2, and folate. Egg yolk is a rare source of vitamin D. It is also rich in vitamin A. Lutein and zeaxanthin in part is responsible for the yellow color of the egg yolk and are important to our eye health. They may be helpful in the treatment of age-related muscular degeneration, AMD. Lecithin. Eggs are one of the richest sources of lecithin, a phospholipid present in every body cell. Some studies have suggested that it can block cholesterol absorption in the gut. Minerals. Eggs are a rich source of iodine for thyroid, iron, selenium, zinc, important for wound healing, and phosphorus, bone health. In addition, eggs are a rich source of choline. Choline consumption has shown to improve cardiovascular health. The perfect food. Eggs are a perfect food. Cholesterol in eggs was condemned before we understood how the body deals with it. From my own research, I have concluded that cholesterol in eggs causes no health problems. Most breakfasts in our diet of hope start with eggs. Eggs provide satiety and good nutrition. Breakfast cereals provide neither. Chapter 31. Protein. The three macronutrients in our body are protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Proteins are the most important nutrients. The building blocks for proteins are amino acids. There are 20 amino acids. 9 amino acids are called essential because our body cannot create them. They must come from food. Our human body is made mostly of protein: muscle, hair, skin, blood, nerves, bones, and organs. There is a continuous breakdown and repair of proteins. For this reason, we need a steady supply of high-quality protein. We have animal proteins and vegetable proteins. Animal proteins are the most complete proteins, meaning they have all the 9 essential amino acids, while vegetable proteins are often incomplete proteins. Several different vegetables need to be combined to obtain a full complement of essential amino acids. With the Diet of Hope, we emphasize the importance of protein for a healthy diet. Proteins preserve the lean body mass. Also, proteins reduce heart disease and provide satiety. As a snack or a meal replacement, we utilize protein drinks. The protein in these drinks is whey protein, which is a byproduct of cheese production. Whey consumption has several benefits. It raises the good cholesterol HDL, and it does not contain lactose, and it is easily digested. Whey is a complete protein. All proteins have a thermogenic effect. They increase the basic metabolic rate, which contributes to weight control. Approximately 10% of the calories of protein are used in the process of their metabolism, creating heat. The minimum daily need for protein has been calculated at approximately 0.36 grams per pound of body weight, or 72 grams for a person weighing 200 pounds. 4 ounces of meat or chicken contain 25 grams of protein. 4 ounces of fish contain 18 grams of protein, and 1 egg 7 to 8 grams. The maximum amount of protein the body can digest is not clear. Doubling the minimum amount of protein to 1 gram per pound of body weight appears to be safe. For people with a very high percentage of body fat, this may be too much. The Inuit of the Arctic, Eskimos, were intensely studied 60 years ago. They were healthy, with very little evidence of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and kidney problems. Their diet consisted of 30% protein and 70% fat. On average, they consumed 3,000 calories per day. 900 calories, or 220 grams, came from protein. Our program provides sufficient but not excessive protein. There is still a fear that higher protein consumption causes kidney problems. To my knowledge, no evidence exists that a high protein intake damages a healthy kidney. We just published a study in the journal Diabetes, Metabolism, and Control describing our experiences with 34 patients with chronic kidney disease stage 3 and 4. On the Diet of Hope, all 34 patients improved their kidney function. Diabetes and hypertension are the main medical problems causing kidney disease. Both diabetes and hypertension improved significantly in our program, basically reducing the risk factor for kidney disease. Some of the criticism of a diet higher in protein are based on studies that the urine becomes more acidic and calcium is excreted through the urine to neutralize the acidity. Newer studies suggest that with a higher protein intake, more calcium will be absorbed. We emphasize to our patients to increase the intake of non-starchy vegetables. Vegetables are mostly alkaline. This would balance the pH in blood and urine. Refer to the chapter on pH. The new food plate from the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, suggests we should get approximately 25% of our calories from protein. A patient eating 3,000 calories per day, which is common in our patients, can eat 750 calories from protein, or 187 grams. We calculate the amount of protein need for our patients based on sex, height, weight, and age. Given that we significantly restrict simple carbohydrates, the percentage of protein per meal is higher, but the total amount is in the acceptable range. Chapter 32. Vegetarians and Vegans. Can vegetarians and vegans follow the Diet of Hope? The answer is yes. There are different types of vegetarians. All vegetarians generally do not eat meat, fish, or fowl. Ovo-vegetarians eat eggs but no dairy products. An ovo-lacto-vegetarian eats eggs and dairy. A pesco-vegetarian eats fish but not meat or fowl. Vegetarians by definition eat lots of carbohydrates. Excessive consumption of carbohydrates leads to diabetes. The southern part of India, mostly vegetarians, has experienced an epidemic of diabetes. In the past, they lived on rice and lentils. Now, they have added pizza and French fries to their diet. The goal in treating vegetarians is to teach them to avoid sugar and simple carbohydrates. The biggest issue is to provide a vegetarian with enough good and complete proteins. Animal proteins are usually complete proteins containing all 9 essential amino acids. Plant proteins frequently miss some essential amino acids. A vegetarian usually needs to mix several plant proteins to receive all essential amino acids. An exception is quinoa and some soy products. Also, strict vegetarians need to supplement with vitamin B12. Only animal products provide B12. Tempeh is a fermented soy product. 1 cup provides 40 grams of protein and 16 grams of carbohydrates. 1 cup of tofu has 20 grams of protein and 5 grams of carbohydrates. Tempeh is considered to be healthier because it is less processed and contains more fiber, protein, and other nutrients. We work with different kinds of vegetarians and teach them which plant foods have the highest amount of protein and lowest amount of carbohydrates. Most vegetarians do well with the diet of hope. Chapter 33. Maasai and Eskimos. The Maasai and Eskimos are 2 cultures on high-fat diets, and both groups are healthy, free of heart disease and cancer. In 1964, a field study among 400 Maasai men, women, and children revealed they had no clinical heart disease, had low cholesterol levels, and low blood pressure. In 2000, my wife and I were invited to spend time with the Maasai tribe in Tanzania. We had the opportunity to observe their daily life activities and their eating habits. Their diet consists primarily of milk, blood, and meat. Maasai are tall and slim, both men and women. We were invited to a 3-day hiking trip to visit a neighboring tribe. Our food supply consisted of 2 goats walking with us. The Maasai had a cup of milk for breakfast and ate nothing during the day. In the evening, a goat was slaughtered. The Maasais first drank the blood from the goat, then each tribe member consumed a piece of raw liver and kidneys. Afterwards, they joined us in eating the roasted meat. The meal ended with a soup made from the bark of an acacia tree. Maasai are slim and strong. Hiking 20 to 30 miles a day is no problem for them. On the contrary, we had problems keeping up with them. We thought we were in top shape since we had recently climbed Kilimanjaro. Interestingly, Maasais do not hunt. They only eat meat from cows, sheep, and goats. Only recently have they been introduced to agriculture. Their living space has become more and more restricted, and their nomadic lives is coming to an end. Couples are only allowed to marry after the big rains when their cows can eat the best grass and their milk is the healthiest. This would guarantee the health of the couple's baby. The only person in the village with a belly was the village chief. When we asked what we could do for him in the village, his answer was to send him Coca-Cola. Eskimos are another example of people who eat a very high-fat diet without showing signs of heart disease and cancer. The Eskimos in the Arctic were intensely studied by an anthropologist from Canada, Stephenson, who spent 5 years living with the Eskimos. On the average, the food of an Eskimo consisted of 70% fat and 30% protein, 50% caribou, 30% fish, 10% seal meat, and 5% to 10% polar bears, birds, and eggs. They have no access to carbohydrates, vegetables, and fruits. They showed no evidence of vitamin deficiencies, and especially scurvy. Speculation as to where Eskimos get their vitamins range from adrenal glands of the caribou to fatty meats to willow bark. Eskimos had no evidence of diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, or cancer. What is more, their cholesterol levels were normal. In the December Diet edition of Harper Magazine 1935, Stevenson described a year-long stay at the Bellevue Hospital in New York eating an Eskimo diet under close supervision. He had no ill effects. He felt strong and his cholesterol changed a little. The only time he became ill was when the researchers changed his diet from a fatty meat to lean meat. He developed diarrhea and lost significant weight. This problem was quickly corrected when he was allowed again to eat fatty meat. In recent times, Eskimos have become exposed to a Western diet and developed all the diseases of Western civilization, such as diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. Hadzapi Bushmen. They are neighbors of the Maasai tribe. Their lifestyle goes back to the Stone Age. They're hunters and gatherers. They hunt with bow and arrows. My wife and I spent a week with them. They were a small group of 20 people. Their leader was abducted from his tribe by the government at a young age and was educated by the missionaries. He was fluent in English. He decided that modern lifestyle was not for him and returned to his people. They are allowed to travel through Maasai territory. The tribes have complementary lifestyles. Maasais don't hunt or eat any vegetables. Hadzapi's main food supply is meat from wild animals, and their women gather roots, tubers, and insects. Their lifestyle has not changed in thousands of years. They are healthy and happy. We join them singing and dancing around the fire in the evening. Their children see no reason to get educated in schools. All they need to know was what their parents and relatives teach them. A lot of people try to eat according to a paleo diet, food that our ancestors ate. They forget one thing. Our ancestors ate every little bit of the animal. The Maasais, Hadzapis, and the Eskimos knew that some of the food had to be eaten raw in order to stay healthy. How can Eskimos, Maasais, and Hadzapi Bushmen be healthy with such a different diet? It appears that their bodies had adjusted to their food intake over thousands of years. They all found a way to eat food that provided essential nutrient. We are always searching for an ideal and healthy diet, but we have difficulties to adjust to an ever-changing food supply. Our food supply has radically changed over the last few hundred years. Sugar and vegetable oil consumption has massively increased over the last 100 years. Excessive sugar consumption is toxic to our body and sugar can be addictive. Vegetable oil consists mostly of omega-6 fat. Omega-6 fat stimulates inflammation. Most meat comes from corn and soy-fed animals and not grass-fed animals. The consumption of fat from these animals has drastically changed from a balanced omega-3 and omega-6 consumption to a predominantly omega-6 fat. Fruits are now available year-round, not just during harvest time. Most modern fruits are hybrids or genetically modified. They contain more fructose, which is sweeter than glucose. Our liver has a limited capacity to process fructose. Excessive intake of fructose can lead to a fatty liver. The food industry also knows how to addict us to their newly created foods. The food industry has also changed the concept of what constitutes a normal portion. Modern disease of Western civilization, such as diabetes, obesity, heart disease, arthritis, and cancer, are new and man-created. Dr. Dudley White, a cardiologist and personal physician to President Eisenhower, had never seen a heart attack in his early career as a cardiologist during the 1920s. I strongly believe that the epidemic of diseases of Western civilization is directly related to the change in our food environment. Following the diet of hope, you will be able to escape this toxic food environment. Chapter 34: pH and Bone Health. pH is a measure of acidity or alkalinity of a solution. The pH of blood and body fluid is 7.4. A pH below 7.35 is called acidosis, and a pH above 7.45 is called alkalosis. Our body functions best with a pH of 7.4. Acidosis depresses our nervous systems, and extreme acidosis can lead to death. Alkalosis causes hyperexcitability of our nervous system and muscles that can lead to seizure and death. Why is the pH of food important? If acidic food dominates in our diet, our body needs to neutralize the acid with alkaline substances from our body. Calcium carbonate, and specifically calcium phosphate from our bones, are used to balance the blood pH. Excessive consumption of acidic food over a long period of time can lead to osteoporosis. In a healthy body, the blood pH remains stable at 7.4. Our food can influence the pH of our blood. For example, carbonated sodas are dietary sources of acid. Coca-Cola contains phosphoric acid. Most carbonate sodas have a pH of 3. Protein from all animal products are acidic. Milk and cheese are acidic, especially Parmesan cheese. The digestion of animal protein yields sulfuric acid and uric acid. Wheat and oats are among the most potent sources of sulfuric acid. Grains such as wheat account for 38% of acid load in a typical American diet. Most food in the produce department, such as spinach, cabbage, kale, and most fruits, are alkaline. Our diet of hope creates a neutral pH by combining acidic animal products with alkaline vegetables and avoiding highly acidic grains and sodas. Milk is an acidic food. Regular milk has a pH of 6.7. Skim milk has a pH of 5.1 to 5.7. Consuming milk that contains a significant amount of calcium may not be the answer for osteoporosis. See chapter on milk. An adequate consumption of protein is important for bone health. Protein also stimulates the production of a substance in our body called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, important for our bone growth. Chapter 35. Got milk? Milk is advertised with slick commercials. When most people in the United States think about milk, they instantly think about calcium. Milk calcium is supposedly good for our bones according to the milk industry. 1 cup of milk provides 300 milligrams of calcium. 1 cup of cooked spinach, 240 milligrams. 1 cup of cooked broccoli, 180 milligrams. How much does the body need? The US government recommends 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams per day. In England, the recommended dose is 700 milligrams. In India, Japan, and Peru, the daily consumption of calcium is close to 300 milligrams. Those countries have a very low incidence of osteoporosis and bone fractures. To get the recommended amount of calcium in the US, we would have to drink 3 cups of milk, which would add 438 extra calories to our diet. Instead, why don't we simply take a vitamin D supplement? A vitamin D supplement has no calories and it helps the bones. Whether milk helps bones remains an unsettled question. How healthy is milk? Milk is designed as a food source for neonates. Grown-ups frequently are intolerant to lactose, the milk sugar. 90% of Asians are unable to digest lactose. 75% of Native Americans and African Americans are intolerant to lactose, while Northern Europeans have a better tolerance. Lactose consists of 2 sugars, galactose and glucose. To split lactose, we need an enzyme lactase. If the sugar is not split in the small intestines, it reaches the colon and produces diarrhea, bloating, and gas. Milk has 4% protein, 3.3% fat, and 4% lactose. 1 cup of whole milk has 147 calories. 39% comes from fat, 30% from carbohydrates, and 21% from protein. On average, a calf weighs 80 pounds at birth. It gains 2 pounds a day or doubles its weight in 40 days consuming his mother's milk, fresh, unpasteurized milk. So, if we want to grow like calves, then we should drink a lot of milk. A patient of mine, who is a cattle farmer, shared an interesting fact about milk. In the case of a mother cow dying and her calf is fed pasteurized milk, the calf will die. However, if 1 raw egg is added to the orphan's calf milk every day, the calf will live. According to our government, pasteurization does not affect the nutritional quality of milk. Why would the calf die if the milk is not changed by pasteurization? What is pasteurization? Milk is being heated to 160 degrees Fahrenheit in 30 seconds and then quickly cooled. Pasteurization is done to kill harmful bacteria, but it also destroys some important proteins. This process prolongs the shelf life of the milk substantially, a major benefit for the milk industry. In 1993, the FDA approved Monsanto to use a recombination bovine growth hormone, RBGH, in order to stimulate more milk production. More milk requires more milking, which causes more udder infections, mastitis. To treat the infections, antibiotics are used. Both growth hormone and antibiotics can end up in the milk. The European Union has banned growth hormones because of the lack of information regarding the potential side effects of consuming milk that may contain growth hormones for a long period of time. Studies from Harvard University, Nurses' Health Study, showed a 44% higher risk of ovarian cancer in women consuming milk frequently compared to infrequent milk drinkers. Results from the Physician Health Study found that high intake of dairy products and calcium increased the risk of prostate cancer. The latest study from Harvard University found a high level of estrone sulfate, a hormone-like substance in pasteurized milk from industry-produced milk, possible link to testicular, prostate, and breast cancer. Milk from grass-fed cows had low levels of estrone sulfate. Chapter 36. Breakfast Cereals. Food for the Toothless. John Harvey Kellogg is the inventor of breakfast cereals. He was a physician in charge of a sanatorium in Michigan owned by Seventh-day Adventists. He promoted a vegetarian diet. Kellogg was experimenting with grains to create an easily digestible food that sick and toothless people could eat. In addition, he thought grains would reduce the urge to masturbate, as he was a most ardent anti-masturbator. He cooked wheat and afterwards rolled it out in thin layers. One day the cooked wheat was left unattended, and hours later it had significantly softened. When the wheat was rolled, each little wheat grain separated like a flake. The flakes turned out to be tasty cereals. Dr. Kellogg patented the process in 1894. His brother W.K. Kellogg recognized the commercial potential. His major contribution to the creation of cereals was adding sugar, which most people preferred to the unsweetened cereals. Dr. Kellogg was vehemently opposed to the addition of sugar. The brothers separated. Each started a separate company. Obviously, the sugar cereals were a big hit and gained popularity. The brothers became enemies and each went their own way. W.K. Kellogg started a massive advertising campaign, and ever since then, cereals with added sugar have become the breakfast of choice. General Mills created Cheerios and started to advertise their cereals as heart healthy. In one obscure study financed by General Mills but considered an independent study, cholesterol levels lowered by 4% after 6 weeks. I could not find the original study. I'd have liked to know what else the study participants ate and did. Some studies exist that have shown lowering cholesterol reduces heart disease. General Mills felt justified to advertise, "Our cereal reduces heart disease." The FDA intervened in 2009 and told General Mills that such claims require scientific support. Now, General Mills advertises that cereals could be part of a heart-healthy diet and could reduce the risk of heart disease. Most cereals are made from refined grains and end up in our blood system as sugar very quickly. Cereals made from whole grain have a bit more nutrition, but their blood sugar response is not much different from refined cereals. There are multiple different Cheerio cereals. Most have regular sugar added. In my opinion, cereals should not be used by diabetics or obese people. The Diet of Hope recommends eggs for breakfast. Patients on our program for 6 weeks lower their cholesterol on average by 12%. Chapter 37. Wheat. Wheat Belly, written by Dr. William Davis, became a #1 New York Times bestseller. It is a worthwhile read, and our Diet of Hope fully supports its conclusions. Our program is wheat and gluten-free. The dietary recommendations from the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, have become a bit more sophisticated since the publication of the Food Pyramid in 1992. However, the food plate is still strongly recommending the consumption of whole wheat bread, cereals, pasta, muffins, and other whole wheat products. According to the USDA, we're supposed to eat at least 3 servings of whole wheat daily. Refined wheat is no longer in. What is the difference between refined and whole? A kernel of grain has 3 layers. An outer layer that is fiber and has some vitamins and minerals, bran. A middle layer that is mostly sugar, endosperm. And an inner core, germ, which has most of the nutrition including good fats. The fats become rancid during storage. Refining means eliminating the inner nutritious core and destroying the outer fiber layer in the process. This refined flour can be stored for a long time without spoiling. Because the flour is devoid of nutrition, our government forced the bread and cereal makers to add some vitamins to the end product. To increase shelf life of the whole wheat bread, preservatives such as calcium propionate, sodium propionate, and other sulfur dioxides are used. Additionally, most bread has sugar and salt added. The modern wheat flour is 70% carbohydrate by weight, 15% protein, and 15% fiber. Of the complex carbohydrates, in wheat, 75% is amylopectin and 25% amylose. Amylopectin consists of branching glucose molecules. Amylopectin is speedily digested by an enzyme amylase to glucose. This efficient digestion is the reason why whole wheat has a high glycemic index of 72. Regular table sugar, sucrose, has a glycemic index of 59. We consider wheat as a complex carbohydrate, but because it is so quickly digested, it acts like a simple carbohydrate. Eating whole wheat causes a fast and steep rise of blood sugar, similar to drinking a can of sugary soda. The fast rise in blood sugar triggers a significant insulin response. Insulin is a storage hormone, and some of that sugar ends up as belly fat. Whole wheat for some people is addictive, acting almost like a drug. Wheat is a potent source of sulfuric acid. Grains contribute a significant acid load to the average American diet. Our body does well without eating quote-unquote healthy whole grain. It's a total myth that our body needs grains. The Diet of Hope provides a healthy alternative. Plenty of non-starchy vegetables, all types of meat, preferably grass-fed, fish and fowl, eggs, good fats, nuts, oils, and cheese. Chapter 38. Gluten. Gluten has been joining cholesterol and trans fat as something undesirable in our food. The food industry obliged quickly with offering gluten-free food made from cornstarch, rice starch, potato starch, or tapioca. This food is basically refined sugar of little nutritional value. On the other hand, our medical societies and dietitians promote whole wheat, which contains gluten, as healthy food. Gluten occurs in wheat, rye, barley, spelt, bulgur, and kamut. Wheat is the main carbohydrate most people consume. For breakfast, we eat pancakes, waffles, French toast, cereals, muffins, bagels, and toast. What is gluten? Gluten is a protein that makes wheat doughy, stretchable, and twistable. It allows the dough to rise when yeast fermentation causes it to fill with air pockets. Rice flour or corn flour doesn't have this property. Glutens are the storage protein for the wheat plant. Gluten consists of two protein families, the gliadins and the glutenins. The gliadins are mostly responsible for the immune reaction that causes celiac disease. The gliadins provoke an immune response in the small intestines, causing severe inflammation that produces severe abdominal cramping and diarrhea. It is estimated that 1 in 30 people have celiac disease. It is believed that many more people are sensitive to gluten, but do not show the severe changes in the intestines. The trouble is that a definite diagnosis is difficult to establish. Symptoms thought to be related to gluten are multiple, ranging from irritable bowel syndrome to fibromyalgia, joint pains, arthritis, asthma, acid reflux, and diffuse neurological symptoms, brain fog. At times, eliminating gluten for a month may help with the diagnosis. Celiac disease can be suggested by 3 different antibody tests. Anti-gliadin antibodies. They fail to diagnose 20 to 50% of true celiac diseases. Transglutaminase antibody. This antibody can identify approximately 85% of celiac cases. Endomysium antibody. This antibody identifies close to 90% of celiac cases. Small intestinal biopsy is the gold standard for the diagnosis of celiac disease. Genetic markers for human leukocyte antigen HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8 are found in over 90% of celiac disease sufferers. The Diet of Hope is gluten-free. Chapter 39. Frequently Asked Questions. Aspirin. Many Diet of Hope patients ask if they should take aspirin. They ask if I'm taking aspirin. So really, the question is, shouldn't we all take aspirin when we get older? There are no clear answers, but it appears that aspirin is not the wonder drug we thought of it in the past. I was part of the physician health study that was started in 1983. Some 22,000 physicians participated in the study to evaluate the effects of aspirin on heart disease and death. This was a sophisticated double-blind placebo-controlled Harvard study. The aspirin dose was 325 milligrams every other day. After 6 years, doctors on placebo, sugar pill, had a 44% higher incidence of heart attacks compared to doctors on aspirin. The strange thing, however, was the same amount of people had died after 6 years. Sudden death was twice as common in the aspirin group, and more people had a stroke from bleeding in the brain. A recent study from Japan showed that elderly patients on aspirin received no added benefits. Studies of diabetic patients on aspirin showed no benefits. A meta-analysis study in 2012 looked at more than 100,000 individuals over 6 years and concluded that in patients with no history of heart disease, there was no significant benefit of aspirin in reducing deaths from cardiovascular disease. The Food and Drug Administration does not support the use of aspirin as a prevention for those that have not had a heart attack or stroke. However, those patients who already had a heart attack or stroke probably will benefit from using aspirin. The typical or accepted dose is 100 to 160 milligrams. Several studies have shown a reduction of colorectal cancer from aspirin use. Recent studies recommend people take aspirin for at least 5 years before it will show any benefit of cancer prevention. The downside is that patients taking aspirin every day may have a significant risk of major bleeding. A screening colonoscopy might be safer than daily aspirin use for eradicating colon cancer. Routine use of aspirin for prevention of heart disease and cancer should not be recommended. Alcohol. Alcoholism is defined as a pattern of drinking that results in harm to one's health, interferes with personal relationships, and ability to work. For most people, alcohol consumption in moderation is beneficial. U.S. government dietary guidelines support moderate drinking. The definition of moderate drinking is 2 drinks a day for men and 1 drink for women. Clearly, this is a case of gender discrimination. Body size is probably more important than alcohol tolerance. A 12-ounce beer, a 5-ounce glass of wine, a 1.5 ounce of hard liquor contains 0.6 ounces of alcohol. The calorie content in each is different. A 12-ounce beer has 150 calories, a light beer 110 calories, a glass of wine 90 to 100 calories, and a pina colada 9 ounces has 480 calories. First, let's discuss the bad problems associated with excessive alcohol consumption. Alcohol increases the risk of liver cirrhosis, cancer of the esophagus, and other gastrointestinal cancers, raises blood pressure and the risk of stroke. Heavy drinking for a long period of time causes shrinking of the brain, resulting in dementia. The good news: moderate drinking of any kind of alcohol reduces the risk of heart disease. U.S. government dietary guidelines. It raises our good cholesterol HDL. Moderate drinking in early adult life may reduce the risk of dementia later in life. Older and middle-aged moderate drinkers will outlive non-drinkers by reducing deaths from all causes. Source: November 2010 issue of Alcoholism, Clinical and Experimental Research. Of all the alcoholic drinks, red wine consumption produces the most benefits. Red wine is loaded with antioxidants, flavonoids, and especially resveratrol. Moderate consumption of red wine is good for the heart. Source: American Heart Association. A glass of wine daily reduces the risk of aggressive prostate cancer by half. National Cancer Institute. The French, on average, have a higher cholesterol level than Americans do. However, they have only half the incidence of heart attacks. The French paradox. One of the theories states it is the regular consumption of red wine that makes the difference. Who knows? During our phase 1 of our Diet of Hope, we suggest not to drink alcohol, since alcohol has calories. We want our patients to be very successful in those first 6 weeks because success is a great confidence builder. Alcohol and calories in various drinks. Regular 12-ounce beer, 14 grams of alcohol and 150 calories. Light beer, 12 ounce, 11 gram alcohol and 65 to 100 calories. Red wine, 5 ounce, 15 grams alcohol and 123 calories. White wine, 5 ounce, 15 grams of alcohol and 125 calories. Gin, vodka, whiskey, 1.5 ounce, 16 grams of alcohol and 100 calories. Mai Tai, 5 ounces, 35 grams of alcohol and 395 calories. 1 gram of alcohol has 7 calories. Salt. Which food contains most salt? 1. Sausage and cold cuts. 2. Breads and rolls. 3. Chips, pretzels, popcorn. 4. Pizza. 5. Soups. 6. Cheese. 7. Pasta dishes. 8. Sandwiches, hamburgers. 9. Poultry, especially processed. The official recommendation from our government and the Medical Association is to lower our sodium intake to 1,500 milligrams per day. To confuse us, they use sodium and not salt to estimate our salt intake. Salt is sodium chloride. 40% of the weight of salt is sodium, or roughly 3 grams of salt contains 1,200 milligrams or 1.2 grams of sodium. The average American consumes about 3,700 milligrams of sodium per day, or roughly 7 grams of salt. Eating too much salt is thought by many to be the main cause of high blood pressure. High blood pressure is felt to cause heart disease and stroke, the leading cause of death. High blood pressure is also a leading cause for kidney failure. 29% of adults over age 18 have high blood pressure. 42% of black adults have high blood pressure. The blood pressure goes up with age. 70% of people over age 65 have high blood pressure. In the chapter on hypertension, we discussed the new guidelines for high blood pressure. Using these new guidelines, the incidence of hypertension will be substantially reduced. Not everybody believes in a low-salt diet. Our brain tells us how much salt we need. Restricting salt may lower blood pressure too much, which activates our stress hormones, which causes vasoconstriction. Prolonged elevation of stress hormones in our blood can cause heart disease. The proponents of higher salt intake quote multiple studies documenting people with a sodium intake less than 2,700 milligrams have a significantly greater risk of cardiovascular events or death. Our Diet of Hope is a low-salt program. None of the above-mentioned salt-rich foods, except poultry, are part of our program. Almost all patients lower their blood pressure within days on our program. We frequently stop diuretics at the beginning of the diet to avoid hypotension, the drop of blood pressure. At times, we must add a cup of salt-rich bouillon to the diet. At the 6-week level, at least half of our patients can stop all blood pressure medications. We don't know if the blood pressure lowers because of the low salt content of the food or if other factors play a role such as weight loss or lowering blood sugar. Most patients develop a significant diuresis in the first week losing salt and water. Very obese patients frequently lose 10 or more pounds in the first week. One 400-pound patient lost 30 pounds in the first week without any ill effect. Based on our data, we believe in the concept of lowering salt intake lowers blood pressure. Which is the best sea salt? All salts have the same amount of sodium. Sea salt or Himalayan salt have some minimum amount of minerals and have a different taste. In the US, most table salts have added iodine to prevent goiters and low thyroid function. Salt for commercially produced food has no iodine. Coffee. Some are trying hard to show the beneficial effects of coffee while others see it as the devil's beverage. Below are several beneficial effects of coffee that have been published. Increased intelligence, improves physical performance for athletes, reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes. Coffee reduces the risk of dying. Coffee is loaded with nutrients and antioxidants. Coffee helps burn fat. Coffee may reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. Source: the Internet. Negative effects of coffee. Acid reflux and heartburn can be caused by coffee. Coffee stimulates stomach acid production. Coffee can cause diarrhea. Acrylamide is formed when coffee beans are roasted at high temperatures. Acrylamide is potentially carcinogenic. Caffeine can be addictive. We must realize scientific studies are not always scientific. Epidemiological studies can show correlation but not cause. Most coffee studies are epidemiological studies. My recommendation: enjoy a cup or two in the morning. Forget the sugar, forget the milk, and use whole cream. Tea is also a good alternative to coffee. Chocolate, the delicious news. The health benefits of chocolate, especially dark chocolate, have recently been discovered. Chocolate contains flavonols, antioxidants that reduce cell damage implicated in heart disease. Flavonols reduce blood pressure and improve vascular function. Some studies have suggested that chocolate consumption reduces the risk of diabetes, stroke, and heart attack. This data reflects studies with dark chocolate. The cacao content should be 65% or higher. My recommendation: chocolate studies are in fashion right now. All the beneficial results are based on short-term studies. The fat content in an ounce of chocolate is 150 calories, and for this reason, chocolate should be used sparingly. Artificial sweeteners. All the health gurus on the internet are strongly against artificial sweeteners. However, they have not shown us any real data. It is their personal opinion. The FDA has cleared Splenda and stevia, our preferred sweeteners. The sugar industry keeps a close eye on the competition. If there would be a real proven problem with these sweeteners, it is guaranteed that we would know about any issues immediately. Most people who drink diet sodas rarely lose weight. My theory is that anything sweet entering into our mouth alerts the brain of possible sugar coming in. The brain in turn signals the pancreas to release some insulin, which is fine if real sugar comes in, but if the sweetener is not sugar, then there might be a small drop in blood sugar. This drop may cause hunger. Can we overdose on water? We're told that we should drink at least 8 tall glasses of water every day. Everyone, young or old, carries a water bottle if they go for a little walk, go to the movies, go to the opera, just in case. The message that the body needs 8 tall glasses of water appears to be universally accepted. However, drinking too much water can also be harmful. Marathon runners have died because of water intoxication. Several of our patients ended up in the emergency room because of low sodium and potassium levels related to overconsumption of water. We need to understand that the need for water is different for each of us. I tried to find the original source for this 8 glass per day recommendation and found research performed by the Swiss Army. Young soldiers were studied on Monte Rosa mountain in Switzerland, training at an altitude of 14,000 feet. For the soldiers to stay in water balance, they were required to drink 8 tall glasses of water daily. My recommendation: we should listen to our body, drink water when thirsty, and check our urine color. Clear urine is fine. Like always, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin. Depending on what source you use, 30 to 50% of all adults are vitamin D deficient. In our practice, at least 80% of our patients are vitamin D deficient. A normal vitamin D level should be above 30 Ng. Some people argue it should be above 45. Vitamin D is the most studied vitamin ever. Last year, my wife attended a seminar just on vitamin D. One thing we know is that it cures rickets. A teaspoon of castor oil, made from salmon liver, contains 400 units of vitamin D. Official daily vitamin recommendations are 600 IU for people under 70 and 800 IU for people above 70. Many researchers suggest using a significantly higher dose. Low levels of vitamin D have been associated with a multitude of diseases: multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, heart disease, and modern nutritional diseases. Researchers from the University in Salt Lake City followed 27,868 people and ages 50 and older for more than 1 year and found that people with a very low vitamin D level were 77% more likely to die compared to people with high normal vitamin D levels. A large cohort study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition 2013 showed a strong correlation between low vitamin D levels and all causes of mortality, including cardiovascular disease, cancer, and respiratory disease. Where does vitamin D come from? It is very difficult to obtain adequate vitamin D from food sources. Most animal food sources have very small amounts and plants have none, except for some mushrooms. The main source for vitamin D is sunshine. UV lights trigger the production of a precursor of vitamin D in our skin from cholesterol. Our liver and kidneys then create the full vitamin. The dermatologists have convinced everybody that sun will kill them, especially in Arizona. Nobody goes outdoors without a big layer of protective sunscreen. Only the tourists have color. Native Arizonians are pale. My recommendation: I suggest try to get daily sun exposure for at least 15 minutes or longer, without sunscreen. After a while, tolerance builds up. I'm not sure why almost all our overweight patients have a low level of vitamin D. My assumption is that since vitamin D dissolves in fat, maybe fat cells have become a storage place for vitamin D. Chapter 40: Obesity and Diabetes in Pediatrics. The epidemic of obesity and diabetes is now also affecting children and adolescents. The percentage of children with obesity in the United States has more than tripled since 1970. Today, 1 in 5 school-age children ages 6 to 19 has obesity. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. With the increase of obesity in children, they now also start to develop diabetes type 2. Data from recently published study from the New England Journal of Medicine showed a major increase of diabetes type 2 in children from the year 2003 to 2012. At the beginning of the study in 2003, type 2 diabetes was diagnosed in 7 of 100,000 boys and in 11.1 cases per 100,000 girls. In 2012, the incidence of type 2 diabetes increased to 9 cases per 100,000 boys and 16.2 cases per 100,000 girls. The calculated annual increase of diabetes type 2 was 3.7% for boys and 6.2% for girls. There's also a major racial and ethnic difference. In 2012, white youth had an incidence of type 2 diabetes of 3.9% per 100,000, Latinos 18.2% per 100,000, African Americans 32.6 per 100,000, and Native Americans 46.5 per 100,000. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes because it started to appear in middle-aged persons and eventually affecting over 30% of people over age 65. Type 1 diabetes, which used to be called juvenile diabetes, is entirely different from type 2 diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, the immune system destroyed the pancreatic cells that produced insulin. Type 1 diabetics can no longer produce any insulin. A type 1 diabetic cannot live without insulin replacement. In type 2 diabetes, at the beginning of the disease, enough insulin is produced, but the body becomes resistant to the effect of insulin. The cause for insulin resistance is not clear. The treatment should not be more insulin, but finding ways to restore the function of insulin. Type 2 diabetes is a nutritional disease. It can be prevented and frequently reversed with proper nutrition. The major cause for type 2 diabetes is excessive consumption of sugar, especially sodas and refined carbohydrates such as French fries and pizzas, the main food served at school lunches, to the benefit of the food industry. The recommendation from our government and medical associations to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, and cereal and rice every day, the evil food pyramid, was in my opinion a major contributing factor to the epidemic of obesity and diabetes. Pediatricians have encouraged us to offer our program to children, and for the last year we have treated children starting at the age 7. The results are remarkable. Children come to the Diet of Hope program accompanied by adults. The adults need to understand the program to be able to support the children. Not uncommonly, the children, however, reverse the role and encourage the adults to also follow our recommendations.